and Economic Development Committee. And it's 1:30, so why don't we get started? Can we take a roll call, please?
Carrasco?
Present.
Perales?
Here.
Mahan?
Here.
Esparza?
Here.
Foley?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here. We have three things on the reports that we'll be hearing in a little bit. And we just have a couple of things. First, we're going to review the work plan. Does anyone have any questions? Any committee members have any questions on the work plan? If not, then we will move on to consent. We have one item on consent, and
I think we do need a motion on the work plan, right? Because there were changes by staff.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Councilmember Perales.
I'll move
Would you like to
approval.
make a motion? Thank you.
Second. I'll second.
Okay, great. Then let's vote.
Carrasco?
Aye.
Perales?
Yes.
Mahan?
Aye.
Esparza?
Yes.
Foley?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Perales, for making sure that I do what I'm supposed to do here. The next item is a consent item. I know we don't have a presentation, but I believe that there are members of the public who would like to speak. So under this is the opportunity for anyone who would like to address specifically this item, Arts Commission Annual Report and Work Plan. Please raise your hand and we will call on you. You have 2 minutes during public comment.
A phone number ending in 4963.
Thank you. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, this is Martha O'Connell. I had my hand raised for the previous item and I was skipped over. May I speak to it now?
We've adopted the work plan. Is this in connection with the work plan or the consent calendar?
Ma'am, I was skipped over. I raised my hand twice on the last item. May I speak to it, please?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, guys. And please, whoever is watching the thing to tell Congress, I just promoted you, Pam, Councilperson Foley, who's got their hand up, you need to really watch who's got their hands up. Okay, I draw your attention to the memo by Ms. Howie regarding the HCDC work plan. I have put in as an individual a PRA so I can get to the bottom of what exactly happened that did not allow these appointments to get through in a timely manner. The HCDC could not have a meeting, could take no action. Also, the retreat was canceled. I have a document in my hand dated May 3rd that shows that Councilperson Maya Esparza did an outstanding job and put forward her appointment on May 3rd. And yet that appointment never made its way to the council so it could be approved. Had that appointment, that timely appointment been approved, the HCDC would not have had to have the retreat canceled, nor would have had to have a meeting where we couldn't take any action. So I will continue my research and present a report on where this is failing, because it is failing. So any help you guys can give to correct the procedure so this doesn't happen again would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Okay, other public comment specifically in related to the consent item. Tessa Woodmansee.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the last speaker, Martha, commenting that you're supposed to take public comment on all your items. Really appreciate that, Martha. So I'd like to comment on the HCDC first, and then I want to comment on the Arts Commission, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. And
so you have 2 minutes to get in both.
Why? We should have had one. We should have had two.
I'm sorry, I'm running the meeting, and that's how I'm running the meeting. You have 2 minutes. Right. Now you have a minute 45.
Right, thank you. All right, the Housing Commission issue, and in terms of the Arts Commission combined, thank you, is that basically, I guess you're hearing me, good. So basically, the issue of the Arts Commission being funded through hotels, that is, or what we call our transient occupancy tax. That's actually promoting a bad behavior, which is traveling. And so we have to start, and people say, oh, we need to support our hotels because it supports our art commission. And I think that needs to be disconnected, that we need to not be supporting fossil fuel-based projects and economic growth that is connected to fossil fuels, and that has to be disconnected. We need to stop economic growth. That is how we will have a livable planet. So when our Arts Commission is connected to our transient occupancy tax, that needs to stop. And then in terms of the the HCDC, is that I am envisioning a way that we could build housing at 615 Stockton Avenue, to buy it for the $3 million or so that the builder wants, the developer, and to create housing that is 4 stories tall with 1 story underneath, and three of these around a community garden. And that what we're building is housing for both homeless and educators, that they would live together 24/7. This is a Christian concept that I saw in other housing development issues, that they live with the unhoused. And that the issue is to both live together, to learn to live without fossil fuels, learn to live without waste, and learn to live without plastics. That we need a sustainable model for all of our works going forward in order to have a livable planet. And so that's how we live together and solve the homeless problem, by putting them, all of us, to become patrons of husbandry. And that would be the curriculum, is to growing food and sustainable lifestyles through no fossil fuels, no waste, and no plastic use. Curriculum.
Thank you. Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. Thank you, Councilperson Foley. I think you're trying to say you can combine the work plan approval and the consent calendar items into one public comment time. If you can at least do that, thank you. I'd like to speak on the HCDC issues at this time. It was my understanding, I've been writing a few letters around, city government around on this subject. It was my understanding and feeling that, there's kind of some last minute efforts to try to bring around the concepts of a advocacy representation onto the commission boards at this time. Homeless advocacy, disabled advocacy, and people were just kind of holding the door, to bring on those sort of practices. But people, from those respective communities are still concerned about full commission ideas for the future of homelessness and disabled issues. And also, citizen police review and technology review oversight programs, commissions as well. Dev Davis has approved something in June for a study of a full commission process that will be returned to City Council back in this upcoming June. So I think there's also an equity, the new Reimagine Equity Roundtable is going to be starting up in January. I think the representation of commission persons at this time idea may be put on hold, and that's why there was a delay for Martha and others. I think those questions are being answered now. Good luck how we do that. I don't know if the representation process will come through. Good luck how you can organize it. I'm trying to explain here what I've been asking about and learning about, and good luck how we can move forward. I hope this can be a description of what I think is kind of maybe possibly happening at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Molly McLeod.
My name is Molly McLeod. Thank you, Chair, for taking this item off of consent calendar as I'd requested. I appreciate your advocacy for people with disabilities that's shown up in many different ways. I am requesting that an additional work plan item be attached to the Arts Commission, specifically Objective 12, monitor and advise on city's accessibility planning for the Office of Cultural Affairs. The actions review reports and monitor for disability inclusion and accessibility practices, provide input on disability inclusion and accessibility best practices for items coming before the Arts Commission and the time period periodically throughout the year. So this would be in alignment with the existing proposal for the work plan. Carrie Adams Hapner has said that both the ADA and beyond that, accessibility for people with disability is woven throughout everything. My proposal would bring forward transparency in terms of what specifically is being done. Two folks submitted comments, but not in time for them to be read. One, Nancy Cavallones, who is deaf, and Catherine Hedges, who is a disabled artist, also support this request and provided reasons. My reasons have to do with what we're seeing as progress. For example, having the public comment with the agenda item number and the directions and having this in large font. Those are things that I and others had requested, and it's happened because we've been bringing up accessibility issues. The decision to use Hopin, an inaccessible platform for June's event, was a significant oversight. There is so much wonderful work being done, and in my email I included lots of fabulous resources. I urge you to please add this to the work plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning back to the committee, I'd like to ask Rosalind to address Molly's request.
Thank you, Chair Foley. Rosalind Huey, Deputy City Manager, and first want to thank Molly and others regarding their interest to make sure that we have as many of our residents here in the city have access to what they want to be involved in as it relates to city government. And clearly, as it relates to the Arts Commission, obviously, just like any other city body, they're required, and its operators are required to comply with all federal, state, and local regulations as it relates to accessibility. And I would just also add that the Arts Commission continues to improve upon their virtual meetings. I know that most recently they have added closed captioning, and they will continue to do so throughout the fiscal year. So with that, we think it's not really a need to add a new objective to the work plan, but this is actually our normal course of business for this commission. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any comments from the committee members? Or does anyone wish to make a motion to accept this item?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seeing no hands raised for discussion, let's vote.
Carrasco,
Aye.
Perales,
Yes.
Perales, Mahan,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Foley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Did you
Let's.
get my yes, Perales? Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi is a little slow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have 3 reports to the committee, and I understand that Nancy Klein will be introducing them.
Nancy Klein, thank you very much, Chair. Nancy Klein, Director of Economic Development. I really appreciate the opportunity just to say a few things as overview to the items we see today instead of giving a preamble to each item. And having these 3 things on the agenda together really provides an opportunity to look at an overview, looking at the economy and a snapshot of the economy today, as well as being able to look discreetly at the business of the arts, which is very important, as well as an update from Team San Jose. We know that we are working together not only on recovery, but still in response. And the truth is that might be going on for a while and have impacts for what we do and how we continue to recover. In addition, what you'll see in the economic snapshot and some of the points made from Team San Jose and the business of the arts, we look to see and take a special note that the most vulnerable amongst us are still impacted severely, while other components of the economy are recovering. and to take a close look at artists who who many instances are those of the most vulnerable and impacted, as well as those in the hospitality and entertainment and restaurant industries. So thinking of these things threaded together in addition to the individual topics is something that I just wanted to draw your attention to. It's a good fortune to be able to have that sort of perspective, and wanted to turn this back to you, Rosalind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'll turn it back over to Chair Foley.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nancy. I really look forward to these two reports because I do see them interconnected. The arts community is far from recovering, and Team San Jose is very much connected to the arts community as well, as they host events that brings individuals and energy and vibrancy into the city of San Jose. And then the economic status report, recovery status report is very helpful and gives us some idea of what our small businesses are going through. So with that, I understand that Carrie Adams-Hapner, you have the presentation, or you're kicking us off on the Arts Mean Business Economic Impact Study.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Foley, and good afternoon, committee members. It's great to have quality time with you this afternoon. I am Carrie Adams-Hapner. I'm the Director of the Office of Cultural Affairs for the city, and also Assistant Director of the Office of Economic Development and Cultural Affairs. I'm here today with my co-presenter and partner, Connie Martinez. She is the CEO of SB Creates. SB Creates is a nonprofit which, like the Office of Cultural Affairs, is a service provider for our arts community. They have different strategies in which they help support and lift up the arts in our region, and they serve a slightly broader region, and that is the County of Santa Clara. So Connie and I like to say that we're tied at the hip. We've been longtime partners. SB Creates has done a lot for the city over the years, and Connie, as a leader, has done a lot for the city over the years. Prior to being with SB Creates, she was the CEO of First Act. First Act did many incredible things, including the new model of the School of Arts and Culture at MHB. They incubated it. They incubated the Multicultural Arts Leadership Initiative. Also prior to that, she was the CEO of the Children's Discovery Museum. So she has a lot to say and a great insight and wisdom. We partner together regularly on different studies around the arts sector. So we want to ensure that we're taking the pulse of what's going on in our arts sector, and also therefore it informs what we can do to better serve it. So that's really the essence of today's presentation. Other ways in which we partner are, for example, on the economic impact of the arts study, which is going to be happening next year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Connie Martinez, and ask her to take it away. Thank you.
Welcome, Connie. Good to see you.
Thank you, Pam. And Carrie, thank you for that great introduction. Could we have the slides come up? I'm not certain who's controlling those.
Connie, give me a minute.
Okay. Maybe while you're doing that, I'm going to just summarize what I'm going to cover today, which is I want to highlight what makes, we just completed this research project that we had started, or we had done before 10 years ago. And this essentially is the same consulting team, creative community builders who did the same work together. So we have some comparisons. And what I'm going to showcase or highlight is what are what makes our ecosystem different than other regions, as well as to point out what's changed over this last 10 years, and then describe, or maybe I should say, remind everyone why the arts matter. And then lastly, summarize the challenges we face and what we are attempting to do about it. So thank you. So who controls my slides? Is it you, Carrie?
Yes, and I'm about to share my screen. Thank you.
Okay, so when I just say change slide, then we'll go on to the next one. Is that the best way to
Okay,
do it?
yes, but I am getting a message that I cannot start screen sharing while the other participant is sharing.
I can share for her, Carrie. This is Mike with staff support.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I'll point it out when I'm ready. So this title slide, want to point out that this is a segment of a mural painted by our talented local artist, Sam Rodriguez. Hopefully you've seen it before. It's on 8th and Empire. And Sam is one of many, many, many artists that are part of our arts and culture ecosystem that I'm going to be talking about today. Before we get into the data, I just wanted to share kind of the overarching headline. And it goes this way. Our arts ecosystem actually doesn't look like others across the nation of equal size and for cities and or regions. So we are different, we are unique, and we lean small, entrepreneurial, broadly diverse, geographically distributed, and culturally specific. So those are sort of the attributes that the data supports. And what I can say about what's changed in the last 10 years is all of these attributes have actually intensified. So on to the next slide. Okay, so this pie chart shows you the distribution of budgets, budget size across our ecosystem. And as Carrie said, this is Santa Clara County. We actually have 1,063 501c3 nonprofit arts organizations in our county. Now that may surprise you. What surprised me is that this number grew by 60% in this last 10 years. Now, what else I think is very interesting is that 8%, only 8% of these budgets are over 500,000, which goes to my earlier comment that we lean small. And the 67% are groups that actually have less than $50,000 in expenditures each year. And what that really means is that these are volunteer run, probably community-based, and often lean into the sort of DIY creative expression culture that we have. To give you a sense of order of magnitude, our entire ecosystem, the expenditures for the entire ecosystem is less than 2 or 3 large budget organizations in other places like New York, San Francisco, and Chicago. And I think it's important to point out that that is not in any way implying that those ecosystems are better, because size does not equate to value and relevance. And I think especially we can demonstrate that in Silicon Valley. So next slide, please. So this is a San Jose. We pulled out the San Jose cultural institutions just to compare to other cities of like size. And San Francisco is there because of its representing sort of those larger metropolitan US cities. You can see San Jose only has 3 organizations with budgets of over 5 million. You may be asking who they are. It's the Tech Museum, the Tech Interactive, the Children's Discovery Museum, and the San Jose Museum of Art. And actually over this last 10 years, this contracted, and you may all remember the loss of the American Musical Theater, the Ballet San Jose, and what's the third one? I'll remember it in a minute. I'll come back to that. What I think is interesting is that during this time, we would consider the Western, the dominant culture organizations that are, the symphony, operas, ballets of the regions, that they lost in terms of their overall budget capacity, 25 million, while the tech-centric organizations actually gained 25 million, specifically the Computer History Museum and the Tech Museum. Let's see, where was I? What did I forget?
It's the repertory.
San Jose Rep. It's the San Jose Rep. I'm so sorry. Thank you for helping me out.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. So this slide reflects our startup culture. So going back to, the fact that our ecosystem actually resembles the Silicon Valley culture that we have, of which is entrepreneurial and startups. You can see how this has grown over time. What's not obvious here is that the percentage of culturally specific organizations grew with this chart, which is also one of the major differentiators from other regions. So also that our business models, we actually show a higher rate of earned income to contributed income than our colleagues across the nation of equal size. And what that again points to is that sort of leaning market entrepreneurial nature of our ecosystem. Next slide. This is one of my favorite slides because it demonstrates how our culturally specific organizations have shifted over time. And I borrowed from Kamal Ball, who, Bell, who has the CNN show, The United Shades of the United States, United Shades of America. So this is United Shades of Silicon Valley. So as these 5-year periods have advanced, we become much more diverse. And quite frankly, today, and this shows out or plays out in the data over 10 years, is that we actually resemble who we are more today than we did 10 years ago. Next slide. So this slide summarizes what I would call the shift in the arts and culture from the 20th century to the 21st century. And some of it also already reflects what I've already pointed out. The 21st century model and economy is much more entrepreneurial leaning, decentralized. There's a lot of more emphasis on creative expression as opposed to the observance of art. Our centralized power is more in the hands of people. And in many ways, we've replaced what is traditionally the funding mechanism for the arts, social elitism, to inclusivity and cultural identity. So all adding up to that in Silicon Valley and in the 21st century, relevance actually trumps excellence. And that does not mean that quality doesn't matter, because quality does. Quality matters to relevance, but it's also relative, and especially in a multicultural community like ours. Next slide, please. So I'd be remiss not to talk about the value of the arts. And there are many, many reasons that the arts are of value to communities. I put these in the order that essentially is my personal opinion of how the arts impact Silicon Valley. The first one being that deep attachment to place in each other. And I think this is a very important point for here, important attribute, because of the fact that we bring people here from all over the world, and they're from another place. So what connects them to this place and to each other? And the arts is like one of the drivers for that connection. Then closely tied to that is creating that sense of community, that sense of place, and the joy and belonging that I think we could all share experiences that we've had with the arts that is somewhat intangible, but probably some of the most important reasons for a value. The statistics absolutely support, and I know you've got these reports that Carrie sent you, that the arts foster health, well-being, quality of life. So that's very, very important. And they also drive academic performance for our children. The statistics are very clear. And I'd like to add, they also impact social change, because our artists are often the voices of, and sometimes our conscience, but also visionaries, and they will challenge the status quo. I put the economic activity in the 5th place simply because we're not going to compete with the economic engine of Silicon Valley, but especially in San Jose, where the arts are so tied to our small businesses, our downtown, and that's true in the smaller towns as well. We fuel the economic activity. And as Carrie said, we're just completing I forget how many years we've been doing this, but the economic impact. So the numbers are impressive and important, but they don't certainly compete with the economic engine of Silicon Valley. As far as the challenges go, this is going to look very familiar to you because we all are faced with our affordability issues. This is a really hard place to navigate financially, especially if you're not part of the technology elite, if you will. And then you couple that with our philanthropic climate, which you've probably seen the studies. 90% of our local giving, our local philanthropy, I should say, leaves the region. And I think what that points to is how important, especially in a multicultural community, that for government, for local government to invest in our arts ecosystem. And just to give you order of magnitude, we did study the 15 cities in Santa Clara County, and I think the total was approaching 30 million. And San Jose's portion of that was 22 million. And that includes, of course, the cultural facilities that you manage and own, but also the grant programs, which, by the way, is 7 times larger than the next city's portfolio, which is Palo Alto, 7 times that of Palo Alto. And then lastly, the arts, public art is part of that as well. Oh, I was going to say that philanthropically, that represents over 70% of the overall funding from local government. So very, very important. And thank you for all that you guys do. Development pattern is also a challenge. We grew up as a suburban development with a suburban development pattern, and that in essence, it does divide us. And, the North grew into the South. And with all of that came also the infrastructure challenges that impact all of us. But it's not as if we started with some of the center that many of our US cities had and then grew out into the suburbs. We were almost the opposite. Then related is this issue of invisibility because we're geographically dispersed, we're ethnically dispersed, and we're small. And so it's very valuable to the people who are engaged, but if you're not engaged, you don't see it. Nor do we have the large cultural institutions, the structures, the galas, and the big marketing budgets that some of our other cities across the US have. And lastly, and that was touched on in the introductory comments, and thank you, Pam, for your pointing out how important it is, and where the arts and artists have gone through first to close, last to open, and they are hurting. And quite frankly, but for government intervention, we would have lost many of our arts organizations. So it's definitely not over, and we have a lot of work to do, which probably brings me to the last slide. So what can we do? And the obvious is to continue funding, but this is more an appeal to civic leaders and to arts leaders. I think we start by embracing who we are and celebrating who we are. We have a lot to be proud of. There's a rich fabric of arts and culture throughout our region. San Jose houses the majority of that. And we need to embrace who we are and the strengths that this quirky culture of Silicon Valley brings, namely the innovation that comes from the startup culture that we have, and the diversity. Those are 2 primary differentiators of Silicon Valley. We also, because we're small, we're more likely to form coalitions because nobody can go it alone. And those coalitions work together and are driving change. And we gave several examples in the insert to the Business Journal, and hopefully you'll have a chance to look at that. And I think it's important to understand that we don't believe there's one silver bullet. But we really need to create a web of solutions that address the issue of space and services and quite frankly, staffing, because it's such an expensive place to live. And lastly, we need to be able to tell our unique story. I don't think we need to compare ourselves to other regions. We need to tell our unique story, embrace it with pride and enthusiasm, and be prepared to inspire others with that story. So that brings me to sort of my summary, and that it goes like this. Our arts ecosystem doesn't look like everyone else, as I've already said. We lean small with no large institutions. We resemble the Silicon Valley culture and look more broadly diverse and it looks more broadly diverse than it did 10 years ago. And using that 21st century lens that I shared earlier, we're actually leading the nation in what I believe will be the future of other regions across the nation. And their arts are incredibly important to our community, and they help fuel our success on so many levels. And yes, there's plenty of challenges to face, but we face them stronger when we face them together. So that's where I was going to land, Carrie. I don't know if you want to add any texture to what I said.
Yes, thank you, Connie. Thank you so much. And I just want to agree with you, and I want to hone in on that point that we're leading the way, and that this report is based on qualitative and quantitative, which is done quite comprehensively, data that is backed up. So there's a link to that data in your memo that you can see if you want to really drill down for some of you that love analytics. But this really reinforces what we have known for a long time, that because of our demographic shifts, people are going to be looking to San Jose for new models. How do we embrace moving away from the 20th century model to the 21st century model? So once again, you know, we take great pride in what our arts ecosystem looks like. I also just want to underscore that the city of San Jose is the largest funder of the arts in the South Bay area. So I want to thank all of the council members for your support of our arts community. And that also these types of reports really inform how we go about our programming and our guidelines and our policy. In the OCA, we have a big emphasis on cultural participation and creative expression, and how through that it reinforces a connection to oneself, a connection to one's network of family and friends, and a connection to community, which is really what we're all about. And the arts are critical to our community and economic recovery, and which we'll be talking about a little bit later. So thank you very much for your support, and that concludes our report. And this is just an informational item. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Connie. Really good information, and I appreciate the SV Creates Arts and Culture attachment that we received. It was really helpful, and I'm going to quote you in a couple of minutes. But first, I'm going to turn to public comments. If you could please focus on this particular item, which is arts mean business, I would be appreciative. You'll have opportunities to talk about the other two items when we get to those, starting with Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. That was an interesting informational report. Thank you. I have a few concerns that previous art commissions and councils and budgeting of art funding has very quite possibly been used for the surveillance and technology purposes of our city. The big belly in the downtown area is what comes to mind. I'm not fully, I don't know if that's official facts, but I've heard the gossip around that sort of subject, and it's been kind of an irritant to myself and to others, as the concept of practicing big belly surveillance technology as artifice, as art itself. And that was its reasoning that it was given some budget money. I don't know how accurate that report is, but that's what I've been hearing. I don't think we should work that way in the future. And I don't think we should mix those kinds of concepts together if that is applicable here. I'm very serious about the future of the need of accountability and honesty and straightforwardness in how we talk about our surveillance and technology practices. It needs to be a very, very responsible future we build for these things. These are the ways we address and avoid the future of war and work towards the ideas of peace and harmony and good democratic practices that build those concepts. To play games in this way is not a Silicon Valley future I want to be living in. So just to be aware of the subject matter and to reaffirm the seriousness of what good accountable practices can do for ourselves as a community in our future, it's vitally important. It's amazingly important what it can do. I am speaking of KSI statistics and how to better talk about that in the future. We have to get our act together how we do this stuff well. Thank you.
Tessa Woodmansee.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciated the report, and the one thing that was important was the value of the arts to deepen the attachment to place and each other, create a sense of community, joy and belonging, foster health, well-being, and quality of life. The problem that I'm having is that we're not doing enough in regards to our billboards. That this happened in my neighborhood, that billboard was put up on a 7-story building, 7 stories high and 7 stories wide. That is like 70 feet and 70 feet wide and high. Okay, and what it was is I had complained to Rosalind, the head of building code enforcement and whatever planning, that the building was ugly. This was ugly what got built in our neighborhood. We don't have an architectural review board. That should be part of our community if we value art. And we don't have an architectural review board. So we got a white 7 stories high and 7 stories wide with no architectural details, nothing in it, no windows, nothing. And so I complained in my neighborhood because it's right there at Whole Foods in Stockton and Stockton and the Alameda. And then what happened is I actually brought it to Deb Davis, my council member, and complained about it. And I wanted the city to pay to have something done on that building, the 7 stories high, 7 stories wide. And that was beautiful. That was part of nature. That was dealing with our climate crisis. Have some type of informational document attached to it that dealt with our trees or something that was beautiful. But what happened is it got sold through Deb Davis. It got sold to the SAP Center and the building itself. And it was saying that it was because it was private property. But that's what got put on it. I was the one who complained about it. That was terrible. And then I complained to Deb, and it gets sold for business. And the horribleness of that image of the killing of the...
Okay, thank you. Michael Sensini, 5140.
You know, most states subsidize art, just doesn't cut it for me. I mean, this Sam Rodriguez, I looked at his stuff, you know, it just looks like Cubist art from 1920s. But, you know, when I've seen what San Jose is incapable of doing via art, I wouldn't want 1 penny on my tax dollars going to it. I mean, I saw Keys and Kodal. There's a nice art sculpture that looks terrible. Then you've got the Ruth Bader Ginsburg mural. You know, I mean, all this stuff is political, right? It's left-leaning political art. And I'm looking at Sam Rodriguez's art. I mean, I like it. You know, I don't mind degenerate art once in a while. But do you see any Italian Americans in it? See any Portuguese people in it? No, you don't. You only see certain types of people in it, which is fine. I'd like to see everybody in it. Something tells me that this is for a select group of people. It's not for it's not for the regular everyday people. And the San Jose Museum of Art, beautiful building, ugliest art I've ever seen in my life. Whoever puts the art in there should be ashamed of themselves. It's gutter art. It's not degenerate art. It's terrible. It's artwork that looks like a failing society. You know your society's failing when you see the kind of artwork that they have in San Jose. That includes putting those knitted Afghan quilts or whatever they are, or macrame around the palm trees. I mean, that's art? Really? That's art. Okay, maybe paint the utility boxes. That's not too bad. The people do a good job with that. But for the most part, there isn't any amount of art that's going to make me go out and go, "Ooh, wow. Ooh, I'm going to go shopping downtown. Or I'm going to go get a $6 cup of coffee down."
Molly McLeod.
This is Molly McLeod. Thank you so much, Connie Martinez, for your presentation on the Arts Mean Business and the overview of Business of Arts and Culture report. One of the things I really appreciated is that you described each of the screens, each parts of your presentation, and that's a part of access. I'm a big fan of the We Create 408. My comments, as I've participated over the last couple of years, are to make sure that people know how to use alt text to describe the pictures, or how to do add captions or audio description. And so my challenge for each of you who are on this committee and in this meeting today is to say, what are you doing currently and how could you improve the consistency? For me, when I'm putting photos on social media, I'm having alt text and then an image description for each of them. And so that's a way we can do it. When I look, I differ with one of the previous speakers. I actually have really appreciated Robin Treen's work and on City Hall art. But I'm looking through right now on that contract, the Fourth Amendment to Agreement for Consultant Services between the City of San Jose and Robin Treen. And there's a lot of detail in there, but accessibility is not one of them. So one of the options that you could do is have, for example, QR codes with an audio description, because you have to be able to already provide what's the description of the art that's going to be displayed. You can see examples of this currently at Palo Alto Art Center and the Art of Disability Culture. And so this is what I'm talking about. To be a real national leader, the City of San Jose has to provide the resources so that all these organizations, so many small ones and a few big ones, are sharing the best practices on how to do this better. And that starts with some better transparency and accountability. And so I look forward to hearing more about that and seeing it and keeping up the challenge to each and every one of you and then collectively.
Thank you, Molly. Last speaker on this topic is Paul Soto. And Paul, I want to apologize for not calling on you last time. I saw your hand drop and I thought that meant you didn't want to comment. So I apologize publicly for that. Now we're on to Arts Mean Business.
Thank you for that, Councilwoman Foley. I appreciate that. However, I had two uncles that died in Vietnam, and my father suited and booted on behalf of this country to protect my ability to participate in democracy. I was deprived of that today. So that's fine, right? It's okay. So that means that my tios and my father strapping on a uniform for this country to defend my right just gets stripped from me, right? Because I'm Mexican. I'm a Chicano. I have never heard, and I have been to literally hundreds of these meetings, so I could speak on this with authority, that I have never heard a more condescending, more self-righteous, more sinister delivery than what I just heard come out of Klein and Martinez. I can't even begin to start. Where do I start? Tech elites, really? Tech elites. They put on one. You know what? I would challenge any one of these tech elites. Sit here in front of a couple of Chicanos and let them tell them what they're experiencing as a result of them coming over here and changing the culture. The language that you're using, let me tell you something. Your marketers are on point. But there are people that are listening, and I get these meetings and I play them for certain audiences that know how to, when you're pitching and you're using language in order. Klein said it's best. Oh yeah, we're gonna have a demographic change like real soon. Perales, you're gonna not vote for any kind of housing, right? Just get the Mexicans out. Remember, all the past meetings, 200,000 people I had quoted as being within the next 5 years out. Get all these Mexicans, the sons and daughters and grandkids of the braceros, get them out of here. They're superfluous. We don't need them anymore. Bring in the gentrifier.
that's the end of public comment going to the committee. First, I'd just like to center us on what the conversation is about here, and it's about our arts community, which is robust, but small organizations who make up many of those 1,000+ businesses. And I'd also like to center us on small business. Arts businesses are very much small businesses, as we heard. There's only 3 that are really large businesses. There are others who are medium-sized businesses, but many of them are just small businesses with budgets of 50,000 or less. That statistic actually surprised me. I'd also like to just to quote you, Connie, in setting the stage, before I go to Councilmember Mahan and then Councilmember Carrasco. Imagine navigating a global pandemic, a racial reckoning, homeschooling, and the social and economic complexities of this world without access to music, film, poetry, performance, visual arts, cultural arts, and festivals. Hard to imagine? We agree, and we rest our case. I completely agree with you. It is through the arts that people have been able to survive and thrive through, but mostly survive through a really difficult time last year in their ability to express themselves. The only way we haven't been able to see expression is in our performing arts, but they're opening up, so we'll be able to see that very shortly. I have a few questions, but I will defer to my colleagues first. And first I'll go to you, Councilmember Mahan.
Thank you, Chair Foley, and thanks for the report. I'll be really quick. I appreciate the report. I thought some of the historical data was really interesting. I certainly learned a lot. I was hoping for more detail on the last topic of the slide. I was feeling the build up to what we can do to support and cultivate and grow, our local community-based arts scene and to expand different forms of publicly accessible art in our community. And I was, before the meeting, went back to what I think might be the last arts master plan for the city. I think it was 2007. I was reading through those recommendations, and I was just curious how this connects to that history, and if that's still a framework that we're using, if those recommendations are still valid, or if we've updated them. And I just didn't see a newer arts master plan. And I guess kind of related, I'll just sort of lump my questions together because they're all related. I guess I'm curious, what, under the heading of what we can do, what strategy right now is the office most excited about that we're actively pursuing? What are we doing that's new or better? What have we learned recently? And I, just to suggest one, obviously we seem to have a fair bit of investment coming into downtown and West San Jose in particular. And to what extent is the office reaching out to those investors and making sure they're aware of local community-based arts groups and trying to encourage them to support those groups and trying to forge the coalitions that was mentioned at the very end. And that's just one example, but I just want to push a little on learning more about kind of where the presentation ended, essentially.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Mahan. May I take that question, Connie?
Sure.
Great, thank you. So first of all, I just want to say, relative to what we can do, I would say continue to fund the arts. And also, how do we look for opportunities for the arts to play a role in other civic issues? Other speakers today have talked about issues that they're concerned about, whether it's ADA or racial equity or environmentalism. So we very much take pride in the role that the arts can play in helping to address many of those social, economic, and environmental issues that we are working on as a city. So that is something that we want to have as a continuous mindset, is how can the arts help support other civic issues? Also, what we're really excited about is just this greater emphasis on cultural participation and building public will for the arts and culture across the city. We see that increasingly so, that there's just an increased greater demand for the arts in all districts in San Jose. You asked about our master plan. We have a master plan. It's called Cultural Connection. Cultural Connection informed our general plan, which when we had our general plan adopted, it was the first time that we had an arts and cultural element embedded into the general plan. And that was a huge innovation for our city. So that was a really great step forward. About, as we're thinking about the future of our city, that we're also thinking about cultural development. Other elements that I think that we need to continuously do is have, make sure that we're doing ongoing research in this area so that we know how do we help to better steward our community as it's growing and changing. The other element I would say is there is an item on the council prioritization list, which has been deferred because of the pandemic, but it is top of mind for us and we're looking forward to advancing it. And that is exploring a private percentage for the art ordinance in the city of San Jose. The city of San Jose does not mandate that private developers contribute any portion of their project costs to incorporating art into their development. And so that is one of the things that we're excited about researching and coming back to the full council with a recommendation around. And I know that many of you, specifically Councilmember Carrasco, has been a big champion for that, that item getting on the prioritization list. So thank you.
Thanks. And I am, oh, go ahead, Connie, sorry.
Could I just add, we laid out 5 strategies in the business that hopefully you had a chance to read. So I avoided going into detail because each one of them is like a 20-minute presentation. I was given 8 minutes, by the way. But there are some innovative collaboratives that are going on around space, arts education. We want to launch an SB Cultural Fund, and which is a fundraising region-wide campaign. And we would want to do all of this in partnership with the city of San Jose. But I'd be happy to talk to anyone who's interested in any of those 5 strategies we laid out.
Thanks, Connie. Yeah, I think that's helpful. I mean, I understand we have limited time in these meetings. Totally appreciate that. I just personally would, as much as the history is interesting, and I certainly read all the attachments, I would find it more interesting and maybe productive to spend more of our time on where are we going and how can the council support and what are the forward-looking strategies that we think are going to have the most impact, and are we doing anything outside of the box while we wait to decide whether or not we can do a private percent for the art. I like the idea. Obviously, we're not doing it right now, so I'm just curious what other strategic goals we have in the meantime, but also happy to talk more offline.
And real quick, and I don't want to over elaborate, but we are in constant conversation with private developers that are investing in San Jose about how they can incorporate art into their development. So that is something that we're doing as strategy ongoing.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thanks. That's all I had, Chair.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Carrasco.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Connie and Carrie, for that presentation. Just a couple of things that pop up for me. I found it really interesting. Let me see what page that's on. Okay. Your page 6 of 8, in terms of the way that art is transforming and the way that it's evolving. I guess a couple of things I wanted to ask regarding that. I wanted to ask you where you saw youth in this bigger picture. When Councilmember Mahan talks about moving forward or facing forward, I'm really interested in seeing how we deliberately and intentionally fill that art pipeline and work with our youth, whether it's technical support, exposure. I just went to the Van Gogh immersion, which, by the way, I loved. When I took my children the last time, this was right before COVID, I took them for a very short trip to Paris. We could not get into the Van Gogh experience there, and it was so expensive, probably triple what we're seeing here. But the idea of being able to bridge the gaps for children who probably don't have an opportunity to go see and experience something like that. I don't know what the strategies are, and you may have laid them out, and forgive me if I missed that, but truly how to bridge these experiences and this wonderful exposure to those families, and especially those youth. And I'll pinpoint Eastside Union High School District has the biggest student population in Northern California, high school population in Northern California. What a wonderful opportunity to be able to partner with the district and be able to bridge these experiences and somehow create a pipeline into those creative arts. And so that's one question, is what are the plans? Are there any plans? How do we significantly and intentionally create that pipeline? And I'm going to stop there before I go on to another comment that I feel a need to make in just a second. The second question to that is also, if you could elaborate on what happened with our private percentage for art, because many of us thought that we had already passed it in the priority setting. The mayor's vote put us over the top. So I'm a little confused as to why that's been halted.
Great. Would you like me to take that, or Connie, would you?
So Carrie, I think you take the 1%, and I can offer a comment or an answer on the arts education. So first of all, I couldn't agree with you more, and that providing access to our children is and should be one of the highest priorities. The one thing that we've been doing, and we're going to continue to grow this, is that we've created what we're calling a marketplace for teachers to go online and with small mini grants, essentially purchase arts education modules, and we're focusing on Title I schools. And I think, of course, COVID impacted our ability to deliver some of that. But we had, I think, in one of our highest years, I think we touched at least 15,000 children who wouldn't have access. And I'm talking about bringing artists into the classrooms, field trips, the whole long list of things. We have, I think, 40 arts partners and about 80 modules. So we'd like to continue to grow that and make that stronger. The second is supporting organizations like the School of Arts and Culture for after-school programs. So it costs money, and especially those who aren't able to access, they can't afford, market-based education modules. So subsidizing their access is also critical. And I think having a network of those, we're inside of Juvenile Hall, we're inside of our community schools, we hire teaching artists, and those are very directed at that population. There's an endless amount of need, and it's just a matter of having not only the supply of education modules, but also having the money to do it.
Thank you. And in regards to, very briefly, in regards to the private percent for arts, as we moved into the EOC activation, we had to be very strategic and thoughtful about what our citywide staff capacity was. And so my understanding is that through a council deliberated process, there was a prioritization of those priorities. And right now the focus is really on community and economic recovery roadmap, which is a later topic.
And I appreciate that. Oh, I'm sorry, Rosalind. Yes.
No, I was just going to briefly add to that. So back in March, when the city council did approve the city roadmap, there were a series of items that had been approved on the previous prioritization list. And so there is a prioritized backlog. And actually, the percent for art program is number 13 on that prioritized backlog. So it's still an effort that the department will undertake. It's just that we're going to get to these other priorities first.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. As we're looking at recovery, and recovery is going to be the name of the game as we're learning to live with COVID and its all its variants. That priority that was passed, and Carrie, you'll have to remind me if it was a year ago, 2 years ago. I don't remember, because we tried several times to get it through. We finally thought we had it through. We were all very excited, but it really is a way of generating some funds and being able to channel them directly into the hands of folks who can provide and create those pieces for us and create that placemaking. And so I know that I can't go back and reprioritize the reprioritization of the priorities. That's a mouthful. But this generates income for us. It generates revenues, and it allows us to move forward with recovery, especially as we look at that diagram where it's moving into very grassroots kind of feeling, and small entrepreneurs, which are our artists, are receiving that income and being able to commission them so that they can display their artwork and continue to provide for our city. Having said that, I do need to make a comment. There was a caller that called Sam Rodriguez's artwork degenerate. Degenerate artwork, and that's a shame. Everyone has the right to their opinion. I think those comments are extremely outdated when you look at the focus of this beautiful emerging artwork. I just had to get onto his page so that I could look at what it was, and it's inviting, it's exciting, it's colorful, it's bright, it's full of joy. And I can understand that maybe for some folks that makes people really uncomfortable because they're used to, seeing the status quo. And status quo in the city of San Jose will continue to be challenged because we live in such a beautifully diverse city where, again, you have a council, you have stakeholders, you have nonprofits, you have private entities all working together to really emphasize the fact that we are not going to go back. We're not going backwards. We're going forward. And diversity is our strength. It is not our weakness. We embrace, we appreciate, we welcome, and we encourage diversity in the city of San Jose, the third largest in the state of California. And, and I don't usually like to comment on other people's comments, but I find that to be very small-minded and a very backward way of thinking. My apologies for my own strong opinion. And the other is, I think that with the leadership on the council, as well as on our staff, and as well as the partnerships that we have right now, I just want to be real clear. Nobody's perfect. San Jose is not perfect by any means, because we're all human. But the fact that we can all hold each other accountable to make sure that there is inclusivity in the work that we do throughout the city, I think is of paramount in making sure that we are a successful department, successful programs, and that we can truly reflect the changing faces of America. And so San Jose is leading the way, and we have not just learned to live with our diversity, but we truly, again, I'm going to just keep reemphasizing, appreciate and encourage that diversity. It's not always easy. I get that. Change isn't easy, but I just wanted to make clear to the previous callers that when you look around the city, on the east side, you have abstract art. Some people are really uncomfortable with that, but it's beautiful work, and it's done by east side grown artists born and raised on the east side who truly understand the experiences, but have traveled near and far to hone in on their talent. And then you have beautiful artwork downtown and on the west side that reflect not just one community, but a multitude of communities. So I just wanted to say that. I want to thank you, Carrie. I want to thank Connie. I want to thank actually all of our staff who really encourages our artists, not only to hone in on their talent and their creativity, but also to learn the ropes of what it is to be an entrepreneur and be successful, because I think we need to continue supporting them and providing the technical support. The last thing I'm going to say as I'm closing, I do hope that we can figure out how to bridge this beautiful experience of Van Gogh. By the way, I'm a big fan of the art. And I'll tell you, as a child, I grew up in Horseshoe, which is on Bird and West Virginia. I went to Gardner, then I went to Hoover. We ended up moving, and that's how I ended up on the east side at Independence High School. The story is long, at the age of 54. But my love for art really came from the fact that the city of San Jose at that time had these wonderful programs at Gardner Community Center. And I got to participate by dancing, being on theater, you know, a lot of the visual arts. I was exposed because they took me to a lot of museums and lectures. And truly that's where the exposure that my mother could not give me, my father could not give me, was given to me through public programming, which was just critical. And I'll tell you that my 4 children have grown up now in museums, not just established, what we consider established classical museums, but, you know, these museums that are smaller, offbeat, that showcase a wide variety. And when we go and we travel, we always hit up the museums, whether it's in Mexico or in Europe, Paris, or what have you, because it truly is the reflection of the spirit of humanity. So I want to figure out how we can go ahead and get our kiddos into that exhibit. If I can host one day, I'm sure some of the other council members might join in with me, but if we could host one day as a city council so that we can open it up just to our kiddos so that they can experience what we just experienced last Friday. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Carrasco. Councilmember Perales.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to echo the appreciation for the work done in this report. And I think that the opportunity that we have to continue to, am I not working?
No, you're there. I hear you.
Sorry. The opportunity we have to continue to support our arts, I think, is not only great, but the outcomes, as I think we've seen over the last number of years, is and can be really beneficial to our community as a whole. And I appreciate the linkage there, the report from the Silicon Valley, or the Valley of Many Voices, exploring Silicon Valley's cultural landscape as well. Thank you, Connie, to you and your team too, from SV Creates, for this great report. In regards to support, and you listed it in your call to action, Councilmember Carrasco pointed it out. I think only a couple council members agreed to continue to prioritize the % for arts as far as in the current work plan during this COVID year. So I know it's not off the table, but unfortunately it's on the shelf right now, as we know. My hope as well is that we can get back to some of that work that we have shelved this past year because of having to prioritize our efforts. But I know we'll have an opportunity to do that again early next year, and encourage my colleagues, along with Councilmember Carrasco, as I know she's been encouraging us and working towards this. It was a great win to get the private % for the arts as a priority for the city. Unfortunately, right, it's sitting there on the shelf with a number of other things, and we want to make sure that we can move forward on that, because that will help with getting resources. And granted, that's still coming through us as a government entity, but it's coming from the private investment, the development that is happening in our city. And I think that's where we're lacking, and certainly that's shown in the report, not only in the philanthropic efforts or investments, but also I think in just private investment in the arts. The fact that we are the largest contributor as a public agency, I think it's something to be proud of, but it's also something to scratch your head at, especially in an area as wealthy as the Silicon Valley, to wonder why so much of our philanthropic investment leaves the area, or why so much of the resources that are here don't actually translate into, I think, great community efforts like this, like any sort of arts investment, quite frankly, whether it was personal investment on private development, which we're starting to see a little bit more of that, but it traditionally takes a lot of encouragement, or the philanthropic investments and efforts. And so the question, and maybe Connie, you can help, but because I know you have the call to action that you put in the report there, what do you think are some of the strategies that we can do? I would say leading by example is one, and I think we do that here at the city with our policies, with our investment. But what more can be done, do you think, to try and get more of our private investors and developers and companies to invest more in the arts, and then the philanthropic efforts as well, which is a big challenge for whatever industry you're in of nonprofit. I think we all recognize that we'd like to see more of that investment, the philanthropic investment, stay here.
So I'd love to have a study session just on this topic, but my short answer is that one of the strategies is to potentially have the call to the private sector to match the county and the city's funds in the arts. And I mean, it's a complicated and ecosystem of funders out there, but it starts with relationships. And I think we're stronger if we have those conversations together.
Yeah, thank you. And, I mean, that's something that happens a lot, as we know, where we'll get challenges from private investment where they want to know what this, the city or the public investment is. And in this case, it's already there and it's not being matched philanthropically or by private dollars. And so in essence, I think that's a great challenge where we can say, hey, look, it's there. It's there in the millions of dollars every single year, especially in the city of San Jose, where it's not is not coming from philanthropic dollars or from private investment. So I appreciate that quick answer. I do think, whether it's a study session or a more broader conversation, I think all sorts of nonprofits would be interested in that conversation on how to tap into some more of those local dollars that we all know are here, but unfortunately don't tend to make their way into local organizations. Okay, thank you for the report.
Thank you. Councilmember Esparza.
Thanks. I'll be quick. I just wanted to thank my colleagues for bringing this. They're bringing up the fact that we need to address this sooner rather than later, the funding issues, and going through the report. I remember, all the times we tried to save the ballet and save the rep. And I mean, this is not a new issue to our city. And we've always had to be creative, like we were with the Museum of Art. That was a creative new partnership back when it was new. And so I would love to delve into this more. I think there's a desire on the council to delve into this more, to Councilmember Peralez's point. And I just quickly wanted to address Councilmember Carrasco's points about homegrown artists and about, personally, I think that our children, particularly, the high school age, needs to be exposed to art, even in COVID. And unfortunately, in the roadmap exercise, we had to choose between survival, right? It's the Maslow hierarchy of needs. But I think that as kids are back in school with COVID and there are classrooms that are shut down due to exposures, and that's going to continue throughout the winter, I think our teachers and schools are trying to be creative. There's an important connection to the arts that I think our children need, particularly when they're battling so many other things right now with COVID, and that we know will continue. So I think the arts kind of give us all a sense of hope that we don't necessarily get from other sources. It touches us in our souls in ways that other things don't. And I would love to see how we could support some of the arts programming more through partnerships with educational institutions during COVID. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the good comments about this subject, and I appreciate the final ones, Councilmember Esparza, regarding education. I just want to mention one particular organization, but there are others, called Starting Arts, that, full disclosure, my daughter works there, but what they do is they actually bring arts into the schools. They bring them into Title I schools, they bring them into all sorts of schools, and what they do, they're a pullout for the teachers. So the instructors are there teaching. In my daughter's case, she teaches dance, and she's teaching in Councilmember Sparza at one of your schools. And they also do after school programs as well. So there are lots of organizations out there who are trying to do that. That's their business model, is to bring arts to kids. These are performing arts, but they also do, there's other organizations who have visual art programs as well. It amazes me that the wealth we have in this valley and in the tech sector in particular, there's so much wealth there. Why we cannot get that sector to be more generous with our arts nonprofits is just beyond me. So I know, Connie, you've probably thought about this, and Carrie, you've thought about this. Do you, and this is probably a full dissertation on how to get the tech community involved. And I hear stories, oh, Apple's not against donating to the community. They just say, go do your own thing. Well, that's not good enough. Businesses really need to model good behavior and model the behavior we want to see. And the behavior we want to see is giving back to community. Whether pick a nonprofit, doesn't have to be an arts, but we're focusing on arts right now. So help the arts community out, and that ultimately benefits the fiber and fabric of our community. It brings diverse thought, diverse ideas across the board to our community, and for the children, it gives them an opportunity to actually perform. It actually gives them a chance to take them away from focusing on subjects that they may not be strong at, math and science. They may be really good at playing a trumpet. And so being able to be in the band, and now that we're back in school and kids are back in school, the fact that they can perform and practice is wonderful, because they all need that. So Carrie, Connie, in just a couple minutes, what's the solution? Or where do we go from here?
Connie's a real expert on this, and but I'm going to just real quick, a couple of key points is one of the things we need to remember is that our high-tech sector are global, and so that they often do not necessarily feel the need to give in the communities where they're based, but rather than in a global market. Furthermore, I think a lot of the employees of the high-tech sector are international, and so they often give back to the communities from which they're from. But finally, I think it's about relevance and relationships, right? To Connie's last point, one, we have to be relevant to them. And so how do we make those cases, right? That this is important for them and their families and their workforce and the products that they're selling to the greater economy. But it's also about relationships. So, we're really looking at how we can open up doors to having those conversations. There's a lot of strategies in place that both our two organizations have worked on over time. So those are my thoughts, my initial responses.
Thanks, Carrie. Connie, you have the last word.
Oh, I do. So I do have a one-pager that I've written that I will send to Carrie, and she can get it to you all, that answers the question. There's 7 primary drivers of why the philanthropic community is as challenging as it is with our tremendous wealth. So let's not go into the why. In terms of the moving the needle, I agree with everything Carrie said, and a couple of other points, and it's really the texture. It's cultural in its texture. I grew up in Minnesota, and Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, highest per capita investment in the arts of any place in the United States, believe it or not, more so than New York. And people grew up with that in their blood. The CEOs took a leadership position to make it happen. In Silicon Valley, they do bottom up. They have the employees essentially decide a lot of their giving strategies. So there aren't, and as Carrie said, they're international and global. So they're not necessarily attached to this place, which brings me to my second point. You need figureheads, if you will, who say the arts are important. So it's a CEO, it's a peer-to-peer recruitment. So it's not just Connie and Carrie going out there, it's peer-to-peer recruitment. The current strategy we're working on is we're creating a roundtable of champions within corporate Silicon Valley. And they're not the CEOs, but they have access to them. So relationships, as Carrie pointed out, it has everything to do with relationships. The other thing you might want to appreciate is the churn that's here. We've come very close. In fact, many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we had this huge initiative we're going to roll out in partnership with Google. Before we got the announcement out, the whole division had been wiped out and they were all gone. So there's a tremendous amount of churn in our corporate Silicon Valley. So we have to navigate that. It's one of the most difficult, believe it or not, fundraising climates in the United States for all kinds of reasons and complexities. So it's not for the faint of heart, but we're not going to give up trying.
Thank you, Connie. I hope we can succeed together. For the benefit of our community, it will make our community a richer fiber. Is there a motion from the committee to accept the report?
I'll go ahead and make that motion to accept the report. I wanted to just ask you, Carrie, what can we do to really start looking, because I'd like to add it to the motion in terms of generating those funds, since we had already voted that in as a priority. I don't know when we're going to get to it, but Councilmember Perales made a good point. The funds are being generated as we speak.
Well, I don't want to speak on behalf of the city manager's office, but so Rosalind, chime in if I'm getting this, out of order, please. But it could be something to the effect of accept the report and encourage staff to initiate the private development process and identify putting the people and the fiscal and human resources in place to initiate that as soon as possible. Is that, Rosalind, is that out of turn? Is that okay?
That sounds just fine, Carrie. Thank you.
Okay,
so much.
okay, thank you.
I'll go ahead and make that motion, although I'd rather say, can we do it tomorrow? But okay, I'll go ahead and make the motion. I'd like it to be stronger than that, but we'll continue to have these conversations.
And I'll second that with you.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? If not, let's vote.
Carrasco,
Aye.
Perales,
Yes.
Mahan,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Foley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good, really good report and good discussion. Moving on to the next item, which is the Team San Jose semi-annual update.
Great, and this is me again. Sorry to dominate your time today. Carrie Adams-Hapner, Director of Cultural Affairs, and I'm here today with my colleagues from Team San Jose. And per the two Team San Jose contracts we have with them, there is a requirement to give two semi-annual updates to this committee. And then in December, the city auditor will be coming forward with you with an audit of their performance measures. So today you're going to be hearing about the unaudited measures for last fiscal year and the plans for next fiscal year. So, and these are all things that we have in contract with them. So they are required to report out on this. So with that, I want to just recognize them. They're John LaFortune, the CEO, Ben Roschke, Ihab Sabri, Matt Martinucci, and Laura Shemielewski are all here with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it, and good afternoon, and thank you to the committee also. My name is John LaFortune, the CEO of Team San Jose, and we have a quick presentation for you. Ben, you have it queued up here, but we're just going to go over our fiscal results for 2021, some goals for 21-22 fiscal year, and also sales and marketing. So Ihab, our CEO, will take it away from here.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ihab Sabri. I'm the CFO of Team San Jose. I'm gonna go very quickly over the performance measure for fiscal year 2021. As you can all see that we did not achieve any of the performance measures. Basically, 16 months ago, we did not know the magnitude of COVID and also the impact on the economy. So as you can see, we did not really achieve any of the performance measure. However, we were able to book about 83,000 room nights. The room nights basically is a good tax income for the city. And this is basically for future years, for the current year and future years as well. Gross operating revenue, we made about $4.9 million. Most of this money basically is for the city meal program, which we have processed and distributed over 1 million meals so far. And we also have some cancel event revenue actually in that number as well. As you see, the gross operating result was also negative due to the fact of we closed basically all the venues, all the facilities. All the events were canceled and the convention center, all the shows were canceled in the theaters. So it was not a great year for Team San Jose. The next slide actually looks better, which Ben is gonna show us the performance measures for fiscal year 21-22. So take it away, Ben.
Thank you. Ben Roschke, Vice President of Research and Strategic Development. Yeah, so as Ihab mentioned, we just had with the facility shuttered for this year, it was a very difficult year. Looking forward to 21-22, with the theaters opening back up and the center opening back up for business, we look to see a much better year. Did want to put in a slight comparison to the pre-COVID numbers of 18-19, and as you can see, even with the improvement, we are still going to be significantly below what our pre-COVID levels were. Most of our industry expectations are to see sort of meetings and events recover to pre-COVID levels around 2024. So we're going to have a very long tail coming out of this, but starting to see some recovery happen within this fiscal year. And our preliminary Q1 results for this fiscal year show that we're on track to meet or exceed all of these measures to start off with. I'm going to pass it over to Matthew Martinucci to talk about our sales strategy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be with the committee this afternoon. So on the sales front, our primary focus right now is to focus on the next 24 months, which means 2022 and 2023. We know that there's a great positive economic impact on the community when we bring people into hotels and restaurants and the convention center, and we want that economic impact as soon as we possibly can make it. We're focused not just on convention center opportunities, but on any direct in-house booking for the individual hotels. We've had some really good success with this, and we know that many good things happen when occupancy grows, and that has to happen before anything else can happen. Rate will grow after occupancy does that. We're ramping up our sales staffing. We've brought back our Midwest Associate Director of Sales to handle all of that critical association business in the Midwest. And we have also posted a new position on the East Coast for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast markets. So we are actively looking to hire for that position at this time. These are critical to our long-term success. And then the last thing, under utilizing travel and entertainment funding, we have a very robust calendar of events. Some of them are trade shows, some of them are customer events in market, and all of this is geared towards connecting with customers and creating the number of leads and opportunities. We have seen since COVID a tremendous decrease, more than 2/3 in lead opportunities, and we are working very hard to reverse that. So those are the main strategies at the moment. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm Laura Shimolewski, VP of Marketing and Communications. Thank you, committee. Happy to be here. So as you know, the largest percentage of our overnight stays came from business travelers. With COVID destroying that market, when hotels were open to non-essential travel, we put a paid media strategy in place to deliver incremental revenue to our hotels by converting leisure travel intenders, all to increase TOT revenue and to drive visitation to local business. We digitally targeted in-state travelers showing intent to stay overnight in the Bay Area with our San Jose messaging. Next slide, please. We hired local artists, curated by Damone Carter, former program director at the Multicultural Arts Leadership Institute, now of Sacred Heart, to tell San Jose's stories and to highlight our assets, all to drive conversion. Next slide, please. The results were strong. The first quarter, that's in 3 months, we created over 10,000 new hotel bookings. We added over $4 million in incremental revenue to our hotels, directly tied to our ads. And this returned $14 to every $1 spent in market. And of course, we put even more than that in our local businesses. Next slide, please. For our owned media, web traffic is up 20% and 91% of visitors to the San Jose Love page are new visitors. This indicates to us a strong desire to learn more about San Jose to those who are served our digital ads. Next slide, please. Our consumer email focused on local events, artists, and businesses and deployed 17 campaigns to almost 700,000 email subscribers. Next slide, please. Social media engagement remains high, and while followers increased across all of our platforms, the largest jump was in Instagram at 12% growth. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Earned media continues to play a really important part in reaching potential visitors. Since January, we placed 46 stories, reaching over 46 million unique viewers for an ad value of over $1 million. Thank you very much. That concludes our presentation.
Great, thank you. Very informative. Going to the public, the first hand raised is Tessa Woodmansee.
Unmute. Okay, good. Well, you know, I've been listening to this and then also dealing with, are you there? You hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, Tessa Woodmansee, cleanairsj@gmail.com. That's my email. Because I've been fighting for clean air because I live in a very bad part of town where there's a lot of disease and death. And so, you know, when we're talking about what's happening, you know, even that I have to listen to, you know, this thing about economic growth and everything is going fine. And so much of our dialogue is being taken up by economics and politics when we have a climate crisis. And you can shut me off. And that's what will happen sometimes. You will shut me off and say, you're not on topic, Tessa Woodmansee. You're not on topic. But actually what I'm dealing with in the background is another meeting, which is our Charter Review Commission. And I'm dealing with that and how it's not getting enough attention. And that's what I've been saying to everybody. It's not getting enough attention. And we're all deniers. We are all deniers because we're not treating it like a crisis. And we're still doing business as usual. And we're not making the changes that we need to make. And it's looking very bad for the reality that we're facing. And it is, you know, we need to all be crying. It's very, very sad what's going on. And we are destroying life on Earth, and we're doing nothing to remediate it. We're doing nothing. What's going on is business as usual. And we're talking politics, and we're talking economics. And that, I think, needs to be a crime. It's a crime against humanity because we are not dealing with our climate crisis, which is such a crime against humanity. And we're seeing it everywhere. And yet we're not changing our behavior. The CO2 is going up. So that's the science. That's the truth. That's all we need to be talking about is the truth. And that's physics and engineering, because we have to solve a lot of problems. And we need to stop burning fossil fuels now.
Thank you. We're talking about the Team San Jose semi-annual report. Paul Soto.
Paul Soto from Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. First of all, I eat 3 meals every single week that is produced by Team San Jose. So first of all, I'd like to extend my gratitude for the work and the efforts that you put into it, because those meals sustain my body. Okay, and a calorie is a measurement, it's a unit of energy. Okay, and so I take those calories and then I use them and I apply them to a computer. And then I go into the Bancroft Library, and then I go into Princeton, and then I go to Stanford, and then I go to all these places and I gather a lot of information. Then I collate it, consolidate it, and try to pitch it here in 2 minutes. And one of the reasons why I'm at least able to do that on my own successfully, somewhat successfully, is because of the meals that you provide. So my extension of gratitude to you for that. However, this whole meeting is like I agree with Tessa. This meeting it's a marketing tool. That's all it is. This is one big commercial. That's all. That's it. You guys are talking not to us. You're talking to these 400,000 people that you have slated coming here, man. Look at the language. Study the language that you guys are using, because it's not yours. It's not yours. And to Ms. Martinez, I would have never mistaken you for a Sanonero Chicana. I would never have mistaken you for that. The fact that you're from Minnesota is quite obvious, you know, especially to someone like me. So don't worry about that. We already know where you're from and what you're about. So what I would like to state is start telling the truth. Perales failed us because he had, you know what, you talk longer now today than you will tomorrow about the evictions. You have talked more today to promote business than you have to protect human life.
Thank you. Mr. Beekman. Please stay on the Team San Jose annual or semi-annual report.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thank you. I will try my best to do that. I hope these words can be relevant. I guess the first, to mention the auditing and non-auditing of Team San Jose issues, I hope that does not have to do with some sort of battling over issues of equity. And, you know, we've got some good practices coming around about how accounting can use the concepts of equity better and in interesting ways. And I would hate to think that Team San Jose has forsaken all of that. I invite them to want to learn how the equity process in accounting can actually be really interesting work if needed to be said at this time. With that said, I also wanted to invite Team San Jose to the concepts of accountable practices with technology. You know, there's a lot of, for instance, new parking spaces with AOPR technology. The data collection and the practices of that, it's grown in leaps and bounds. And for Team San Jose to be explaining that to visitors, people coming in, that's positive steps. That's the good stuff. That's explaining how we're building a more responsible, better future. And I think that's the innovation actually, that I think people want to hear. It's based on open democracy, and people want to hear that kind of stuff. With 28 seconds, I wanted to quickly remind that you guys can write to myself if you have issues about I can further describe the commission process that's been taking place, and its questions and problems. They've been burned a bit in the past. I'm understanding. I can explain a bit more of that and give a bit more detail as needed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Turning back to the committee, does any committee members have any questions, or is there a motion to accept the report?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, then let's vote.
Roscoe? Perales?
Yes.
Mahan?
Aye.
Esparza?
Yes.
Foley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our last report is the Economic Recovery Status Report.
Good afternoon, Chair Foley and committee members. My name is Nathan Donato Weinstein. I am with Office of Economic Development and Cultural Affairs. It's awesome to be with you here today. Let's get started with a general framing statement. I'm going to kick us off today by looking at some economic context, 18 months or so into this pandemic. But as we look at these numbers, it's important to recognize that businesses and residents in San Jose are experiencing still dramatically different realities, depending on what they do, where they are, and what resources are available to them. And in a lot of ways, this is similar to the health impacts of COVID-19, which have been disproportionately concentrated in more vulnerable communities. So as we look at some of these economic indicators, you will also see in many ways a tale of two cities. It's also important to reiterate that 18 months into this pandemic, public health conditions continue to drive economic reality. So just take a look at the summer as Delta surged and impacted activities, particularly in the hospitality sector. And we're going to take a little bit of a look at that in a second. But the good news is that we stand a really good chance to recapture some of this economic momentum thanks to our strong vaccination rates and resident and business adherence to public health advice. And of course, that's thanks to the tireless work of county, city, and community partners like Asian Americans for Community Advancement, which is shown here at a vaccination event. So let's zoom out real quick for some more good news, which is consumer spending. So after lagging other parts of the country for many months, consumers in our region are opening up their wallets. And believe it or not, spending is eclipsing pre-pandemic levels. Number of reasons for this, pent-up demand and high savings rates. But spending is not up universally, and entertainment and transportation are still down. Hotels and restaurants are lagging. Next up, just wanted to say a quick word about our business, our business open rate. So data on how many businesses have closed in San Jose is actually not tracked by official sources, but there are some signposts we can look to. A small business software company called Homebase actually tracks the percentage of small businesses that are open in major metro areas using software. And according to their data, the San Jose region is seeing about 20% fewer businesses open today as compared to January 2020. And so there's actually little change or movement since the spring, even though the volume of employees working has markedly improved. So when it comes to commercial real estate, our market has diverged in some interesting ways. Industrial, R&D, and investment sales remain stable or even seeing growth, believe it or not. But it's a different story in the office sector. So some office tenants are opting to downsize or sublease part or even all of their space. And at the same time, many of our city's office employers continue to keep their employees working from home at rates higher than peer cities across the nation. And this has important trickle-down impact on small businesses that rely on those employees. And finally, while our big box retail portfolio has remained remarkably stable over the past year, we have seen growing retail vacancies in commercial corridors and strip centers, particularly in more vulnerable neighborhoods across the city. So let's zoom in on individual business sectors in San Jose and just take a quick look at how they're performing. Looking at sales tax. Now, full disclosure, sales tax is a lagging indicator, but we just got our second quarter numbers last Friday and took a quick look. And what you see is that some sectors, as judged by sales tax receipts, are doing fine. One bright spot consistently has been construction. However, at mid-year, our restaurant and sort of hospitality-oriented sectors, things like gas stations, clothing stores, department stores, were still down about a third when compared to pre-pandemic levels. And a lot of this is at least partly due to that work from home variable. Just look at that apparel statistic to see the impact. Indeed, when you look at cell phone movement data in San Jose, you can see that San Jose area residents continue to stay closer to home at rates that are higher than the national average. And that impacts spending. And just pausing on sales tax for one more slide, looking within the city at how each area is faring, sales tax receipts are bouncing back everywhere. But some areas are performing more strongly than others. So this chart is showing you what percentage recovery have we seen from the depth of the sales tax decline, which took place a year ago in Q2 2020. And these trends are influenced by many factors. For instance, strong growth rates in the South and West Valley areas. These are our inclusionary housing ordinance areas. You may remember them, were led by very strong rebound in automotive sales, which are concentrated there. Also, I'll point out there is a data reporting delay that affects Willow Glen that we should have fresh data in the next few weeks. Shifting to unemployment, super important economic indicator. Good news, our rate has fallen dramatically from the catastrophic peak of April 2020, but there are some things that should give us pause. First is that we've seen a plateau in progress over the summer. Second is that this headline number, 5.3%, where we're currently at, it masks the labor market experiences of workers of color who typically see dramatically higher rates of unemployment, and also of women who have been dropping out of the labor force at rates higher than men have. That's not reflected in our local numbers. Also, we know that unemployment rates throughout the pandemic have been higher in Central and East San Jose. And staff is working on updating our census tract estimates of unemployment, and we expect to have that map ready in the next week or so. Finally, we've heard from many small business owners of all sectors who are still reporting difficulty hiring staff despite the slack in the labor market. So a lot of reasons for that, and they're not fully understood yet, but it include things like affordable access to childcare, concerns about safety on the job, and stuff like that. So at the depth of the pandemic, our city had nearly 77,000 residents out of work. Today, that number is about 29,000. And as you can see, we've recaptured nearly all of the lost jobs in several sectors, which is great. But it's a whole different story for sectors that are tied to other aspects of the economy, more of kind of the physical economy, like leisure, retail, education, and health. And these sectors actually lost momentum during the Delta surge over the summer. And again, this just speaks to the volatility of the economy and the degree to which it's being driven by the pandemic. And that dynamic, the weaknesses in those lagging sectors, we know that that disproportionately impacts workers of color, which is because they're heavily represented in those industries, which also tend to be lower paying. And so the share of workers of color in things like food prep, healthcare support is double the share of those populations in management or financial occupations. And this dynamic affects communities within San Jose differently because resident workers in these sectors have a strong population base in certain neighborhoods, especially Central and East San Jose. My last economic context slide before I throw it over to Blage for the work plan is a quick word on government business relief programs. So federal, state, and local governments spent hundreds of billions of dollars over the last 18 months to support small business, mostly small business during the pandemic. And two takeaways I wanted to leave you with. One is that these programs absolutely benefited thousands of small businesses right here in San Jose, all over the city. The biggest was the Paycheck Protection Program, and that dumped over $2.5 billion into 18,000 businesses in our city limits. But there's a flip side, and that's that it missed many others, especially the smallest of the small businesses, and those businesses, many of those businesses in under-resourced communities. There's a lot of reasons for this, things like access to culturally competent technical assistance, financial literacy, professional services, and figuring out how to help our businesses capture more funding than next time, and even currently for that funding that still exists, is a major focus of our work going forward. More information on how government assistance to business flowed into San Jose is available in our July 30th info memo on business outreach and financial support. So that's just a quick overview, a quick economic tour of the city as of September 2021. With that, I'm going to hand things over to Blage, who is going to review our work in response to these dynamics and what we've learned. Blage?
Thanks, Nathan. So good afternoon, council members. Blage Zalalich, Acting Deputy Director for Business Development. And as Nathan just mentioned, I'm going to take you through the recovery work plan that we embarked on through September 2021, some of the lessons that we learned, and then our proposed work plan looking ahead. So all of the economic context that Nathan provided really informed OEDCA's activities. The business development team specifically shifted our focus in 2020 to primarily assist small businesses, and our work through September has been wide-ranging. One of our key focuses has been information and outreach to help companies access financial support, free technical assistance, health and safety guidance, and safety nets. We have done our best to connect companies to workers, help companies open up safely during the pandemic, and to transition their business operations to outdoors via our SJ Alfresco initiative. Some of those highlights are listed here on the slide and are really categorized in three buckets, kind of the three rings we have here, which is city-wide initiatives, neighborhood level, and individual level initiatives. More detail specifically, you can see there's a lot on this slide. We go more into detail in the memo and the attachments to the committee memo. Next slide, please, Nate. So since March of 2020, we've collected a few matrix highlighting the work that we've done here on this slide. We're very proud to have played a role in getting the word out about major relief programs and safety net resources available to the businesses in our city, as well as our own management and distribution of city fund grants. And anecdotally, we've heard reports from small business owners who did secure funding or lifeline through the information we've provided that our services were much appreciated. Next slide, Nate. So some of the lessons learned from our COVID outreach are summarized here on this slide. We kind of came up with our top 8. And what I'd like to do is just underscore kind of the top 3 that we found, which is, first of all, access to professional services and technical help was highly determinative of business survival when it came to the emergency grants and loans available. Second, language access was one of the biggest ways that we could help and that we can help moving forward. The very act of connecting people with information in their primary language really, we saw, make all of the difference in the world in people's comfort level and their willingness to kind of take the next step. And quite honestly, building trust in government and the information that we were handing out. And then lastly, what we learned, the big lesson was that local business support networks and partners are key. That, you know, the business development team is a small team of 10. We've got over 60,000 small businesses in our city, and there's no way that the city can possibly work one-on-one with every business. So we really relied heavily and will rely heavily moving forward on our existing portfolio of business support partners and nonprofits. And what we learned is we definitely need more of them, and we need to build up the capacity of those that exist. So next slide. So as we shift to our next phase of recovery, we are going to continue to respond to small business needs, but we are going to take a more programmatic approach because we've had a little bit of time to learn some lessons and to think about what we need to do moving forward. So you can see on this slide that our work plan, as mentioned previously, focuses on work streams supporting recovery at the individual, at the neighborhood, and then at the citywide level. And here you can see kind of the three work areas: economic stabilization, development, and then convention, tourism, and destination marketing, where our efforts are really focused on activities with major revenue generating and retention impacts, such as facilitating major development in our city. We are focused here on the supporting the return of events and business meetings, and you've heard some of that here today. And then also helping our large employers successfully train and transition folks back into the office. Next slide, Nate. On the neighborhood level, we've got new projects that are designed to build capacity with our business associations and among our technical assistance providers. So these two things, coupled with our work with small business, is what we're calling our Boost Biz SJ initiative. Much of this work specifically is focused in our city's central and east side areas. And we are, this approach is basically to target the communities that were most impacted by the crisis that we went through over the last 18 months. So for instance, we are in the process of bringing on 2 new multilingual staff members that are going to be focused on Spanish and Vietnamese business outreach. And we are supporting the formation of the Quetzal Gardens Small Business Center with our partners at the Latino Business Foundation along Alum Rock, and also exploring the property-based improvement districts, the formation of those districts in underserved communities in our city. And lastly, here I just wanted to point out, it's number 2. It's just a short line on the slide, but we're going to be ramping up the implementation of our Economic Development Association or Administration grant that we received earlier this year with matching funds that we received from the city budget process. We actually have about 16 kind of programs under that initiative where we are going to be focused primarily on providing capacity building services in Central and East San Jose. And then lastly, on the individual basis, we're going to focus on career pathways for displaced workers or underserved youth, such as our rapid response programs, our resiliency corps, and other paid work experiences programs through our Work to Future folks. Small business support here on the slide includes revamping our system for referring businesses to technical assistance providers so that business owners can better access the appropriate provider and receive the services that they need most. And then something that we started that we're looking forward to continue is our business walk series, basically where we get out there in a small team and walk commercial corridors and key business neighborhoods throughout the city to really bring awareness of the resources that we have access to. And then last, we are looking forward to kind of once the dust has settled on both the state and federal relief grant programs that are out there, we're looking forward to launching a small business grant program of our own that is going to specifically target business owners who are left out of the federal and state programs. And so in conclusion, I would just like to acknowledge the team of folks that has been doing this work. You can see our business development team, our cultural affairs team, our Work to Future team with a few partners from other departments. I would just want to put up the names of the folks that have been doing this work so you can see. And of course, all of us and all of this work is done under the leadership and guidance of our department director, Nancy Klein. And so with that, Nathan and I would both like to thank you for your time, and we are open to take any questions that you have on the presentation. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Blage. So I'll turn to the members of the public. Tessa. economic recovery status
Okay.
report.
Right. And so that's where economic status report, but the name of your commission is community and economic development. So that was like, oh, I really like that. I never have gone to your economic development, meetings. And now I am. And I'm seeing the engine behind the destruction that's happening is that we're going on as business as usual and talking about economics and politics. And it's all about economics. And it's where all our money has gone to keep fueling this capitalism that we're keeping on fueling. And what I'm saying is we have to break it down and stop. That's what the science says we have to do, is to stop economic growth, degrowth. My husband is saying it right here, degrowth. And so when you are all talking about how everything is going great, and the only time it actually, the truth is, there were two things that when we stayed home, the amount of accidents on the road had really decreased. Oh, that was good knowledge. We had to stay home, and even now people are staying home more, but you're wanting to bring them out, and it's all in advertising, and that's even what Paul Soto said. You're all advertising to get us back into this way of being that we learned caused us death and destruction, but we need to keep going. And we're not talking about climate crisis. That's the real issue. Is if we were talking about climate crisis, we would not be fueling what we're fueling and putting the money into business as usual. We need to put it into transformational change, is what the science says. And so you're not doing that. The CO2 is going up. That is the truth. And we can't look away from that. And we are going towards destruction and more and more of what we have now. And it's intense, and it's only going to get worse. And you're not changing. And that's the truth. And that's where, it's going up. And that's why Greta said.
Phone number 5140, Mike Sensini.
You want economic development, you get rid of all your rules, your permits, your people who drive around in the Priuses with their Docker pants and blue polo shirts. That's what you get rid of if you want economic activity. You know what else you get rid of? Having to show papers where you go. You want to go to a hockey game? Show your papers. Want to go to your terrible art museum? You got to show papers. That hurts economics. What happens when your phone doesn't work, you forgot the thing, or you're like me, you didn't get vaccinated, right? I'm not going to do that, especially after you guys told me to do it, right? Forever, you're not going to ever get it. So if you want economics to happen, you don't tax people like you do. You allow those patios to serve alcohol and whatnot. I mean, what does it take to have to do that for you people? You guys, oh my God, someone's going to drink a beer on a patio. What are we going to do? Yeah, you guys found out right away you had to do it to keep the businesses alive. You see how many pieces of paper the business has to post on the front of their building for COVID? It's like 14 sheets of paper they have to tape to the window. It looks like something out of a totalitarian government, all the rules and regulations, the way it's worded. I read it. I read those 14 pages on the Britannia Arms. You remember Britannia Arms, Pam? Where you threw me off your meeting? You know the place. Anyway, yeah, that's what you guys are doing. That's economic development for you people. Or putting up some, terrible piece of public art, or what is that thing? You got that wall of light wands that are powered by wind or whatever. The ugliest thing I've ever seen in my whole entire life. That's what you guys paid money for? Oh my God. But you're going to build a.
Paul Soto.
Yeah, Paul Soto from Horseshoe. I'd like to Mr. Sensini makes a lot of sense, and he's funny as hell because he's direct. These are like your meetings is laced. It is laced with strategically placed language. What you're doing is you're You're playing with people's minds. You're having two parallel conversations at the same time. Two. Okay, you're speaking directly to people that understand what is being planned, which is the 400,000 year and the entire infrastructure, be it economic, be it arts, be it all the chess pieces are going into place. I played chess, man, with the most dangerous sociopaths in the state of California. I've had as my cellies. I've had playing chess. I've eaten with them, slept with them, talked with them, joked with them. So I think I can spot a sociopath when I see one and I hear one in terms of the language usage. Okay, and that's what I'm hearing here. You guys are planning for the complete excision with precision, excising all the granddaughters, all the grandsons, all the tios, all the nephews of the braceros. Why? Because this is no longer an agrarian economy. And what this city was doing was putting Mexicans on track. Oh, well, no. You guys, and you know what, Councilwoman Foley, you alluded to that. You said, oh, well, maybe people that aren't good at arts or, math or other topics, they're good at this. That's the con they sold us and tracked us into the vocations. And Mexicans were denied colleges. That was the beginning of the Chicano movement, because the Chicanos were tired of being tracked to the vocations and not being tracked to colleges. And now you guys don't want to deal with that mess that you created.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I guess first, to try to clarify a few previous words, it was advocacy who was getting perhaps burned a little bit in deciding the future of a representational process or a full commission process. If anyone wants to write me on further information on that subject I've been learning about, please do. Sorry for the trouble. To speak on about first the economic task force board that's being considered for this winter and next year. Good luck in how you can move forward with those ideas. I think having school district persons on that board along with union representation, I think that's a mighty one too, in how to really talk about our future of our city in the next year and how to prepare for 2023 and beyond. It seems really important, and I think it can bring in school kids. It can just bring in a lot of a unified effort that I find interesting. I know Councilperson Mahan initially mentioned the idea of bringing in like maybe banking and that sort of thing. If we bring in people not SJDA, I think that maybe possibly could be an interesting alternative if just a few representatives are invited to that process as well. Hopefully that can be the sense of the anger that's being geared towards Mahan, and I hope we can learn to get over that issue with the housing issues. You know, to mention that housing and the economics of that and the subsidy language you were using here, we are just going to be inundated with new subsidy and funding questions, I feel at this time, that we have to be really responsible about and not go over the top with. That I felt Mahan's meeting at the Rules and Open Government, it was starting to drift that way, and we have to be cautious and do our good practices first, and then we can experiment. Thank you.
Molly McLeod.
Good afternoon, this is Molly. Topic of economic recovery is so very important. And I want to highlight some of the opportunities that are available when we take a disability informed and accessibility focused approach, plus language justice. So for example, QR codes of artwork. Imagine how many people could be employed providing audio descriptions of artwork in multiple languages, so that when you're at an event in person, whether you're at the San Jose airport or a large museum or a pop-up event, and you can use a QR code and then hear an audio description in English, Spanish, Vietnamese. How about Tagalog? How about Russian? How about the training of paid interpreters, but also a core of volunteers who care about community and art and provide audio descriptions. That's something that the Knight Foundation funded for elders in parks recently. So there are so many different ways of getting involved, and looking at things that are as problems as also being opportunities for economic recovery by expanding what we view as possible and who's welcome and who's involved. And that reaches down to those who are most economically impacted, because due to racism, due to environmental injustices, people of color are more likely to be disabled earlier and more often in life. And that's should not be ignored. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Turning back to the committee, I just have a few questions, and then actually I'm going to turn it over to Council Member Esparza to take on managing the rest of this meeting, as I have another commitment that I have to head out for. I have a couple of questions. Thank you for the report, and I just wanted to ask you a couple questions about the business walks that you're doing. That how are you targeting areas? How are they going? What's the conversations that you're having? What are the goals of the programs? And how are you measuring success on those walks?
So thanks for the question, Chair Foley. We are taking a lot of different inputs, quite honestly, to determine where we can walk. And we have done, ultimately we want to hit all the council districts, at least one in each council district, but we anticipate many more, really focusing on commercial corridors and kind of commercial hubs. We're focusing in areas that have been hardest hit by the pandemic over the last 18 months. We are focusing in the neighborhoods where we know there's a predominant number of small businesses, and primarily either minority-owned or family-owned businesses, right? And also in areas where we do have a lot of the data that we're able to discern and kind of sift through, and we know where a lot of the federal and state grant monies, especially with the PPP loans, kind of what neighborhoods via zip code those went into and where they didn't. And so we're really trying to be smart, strategic. It's a little bit of an art. It's not a complete science. And we are, probably a team of 6 folks currently. And, right now we only have 2 of our team members that have, or 3 of our team members that have kind of language capabilities other than English, right? So we've done, so far we've done walks along Kaye Willow, in Alum Rock Village, Cambrian Park Plaza. We've gone West San Carlos Street. So we're trying to spread the love, and our intention also is to take input from council members. If there are specific areas of your district and commercial corridors, we are happy to take that input and go out and talk to businesses in those areas.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about the language issue, and you are bringing people with you who have language skills that they can communicate with fluently with the business owners or business employees in the various walks that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's really important. And are we giving them something? Are we handing out? Do we have a handout? What's the basis of the handout?
We do. We have a resource brochure that's printed in English, Spanish, Vietnamese. Primarily, those have been kind of the 3 languages, and they're a resource brochure that we've kind of updated through COVID. So in the beginning, it was about some of the state and federal resources, some of the city resources that we had, access to capital, business and technical support. There were we handed out some of the vaccination cards and locations for people to be able to get that information. Also, we have information in those resource brochures about our webinar series, which is also usually about safety net services, access to resources, and technical support.
Okay, thank you for that. So you have done a walk at Cameron Park Plaza. Why was I not aware of that? Because I would have liked to join you. So just a shout out, and maybe other council members want this same information, is that when you're going to be walking in our neighborhood, please reach out to us, because I would love to be on those walks as well and hear what the business owners are having to say. I go into businesses all the time. I'm sure all the council members on this meeting go into businesses all the time, but it would be good to come in with someone else and hear what the other conversation is, because it's always steered in one particular way. So please reach out to our office so we can coordinate a walkthrough in one of our neighborhoods. And I see Councilmember Mann's shaking his head yes, indicating he would like that as well. So, but I think that's really important, because I think we can get valuable information and assist businesses. I was interested in the biz chat. And you know, I'm a small business owner. I'm actually, by your grading, I'm a micro business owner. So I'm actually sitting in my business now, my mortgage business, because at home I don't have any internet connection. So I'm here. At any rate, I'm curious about the business chat. I know as a small business, I do get your emails that you send out regularly. That isn't the best way of communication, not necessarily to the owners. And you mentioned that in your memo, that is the case. That's not the best way to reach people. So how many participants do you have in the biz chat? How often does it happen? How is it structured? And do you have specific topics that you're covering?
I'll take a crack at that if that's okay. Really good question. So and I believe, so our webinar series, or our biz chat series, has been going on pretty regularly for the last really 18 months, but we formalized it several months ago to run on every other Thursday. And the attendance varies. So when we have a hot topic, like a new government funding program or something like that, we'll get like hundreds of attendees. It's amazing. And that's, with our advertising through our flyering, we post the calendar online, we get it out to our business owner space partners, so our network of nonprofit assistance providers, to try to get some force multiplier effect, and of course the e-blasts. Now, when we have a more sort of specific sort of topic, so for instance, recently Sal hosted with SJPD a program that was not about a business relief topic. It was about sort of preventing crime and how to sort of understand how to work with the police and make your business safer. We didn't have hundreds of people, but we had a pretty good turnout. The cool thing we do is that for every program, even if there's just a couple dozen people that show up virtually, we post it on YouTube, and then we can send it out after the fact. And honestly, we get a lot of folks who reply to our general inbox and say, "Oh, I couldn't make your webinar. Did you record it?" And now, because we're using the YouTube so much, we're able to point them to that. So it has kind of a long tail. And last thing I'll say is, when we did experiment with a drop-in sort of office hours program for several months, where we just had sort of experts on hand and we did a brief presentation and just opened it up for conversation. That was less successful, and so we now are doing kind of very much programmed content.
Okay, very good. We're all trying various ways to reach out to our community, some with open forums, some with curated content where we have speakers and such, so it's good to hear. And finally, I want to talk to you about the PPP loans. And I appreciate the zip code information that you provided us. That was really interesting to see what the citywide numbers are in relation to various zip codes, broken it down. And I was curious that some areas that I didn't know were thriving really did thrive with the PPP loans, which is great. And I know a lot of our restaurants and small businesses, that was their lifeline. Some benefited from one PPP, some took two. The difficulty is access to capital that you raised, and that's really was difficult for many to navigate from a language perspective, because when you deal with applying for federal grant, there's paperwork involved, and there's a language that is used by bankers that isn't used by your average business person or small business person necessarily. So that was really difficult. So and it looked like we were able to really help small business owners help navigate slightly that. I mean, we're not able to say, here's a lender who can help you, or here's a bank who can help you, but were we able to help them navigate the system, because it was complicated, very complicated.
Let me jump in on that, and then Blage and Nathan will respond. Part of that conversation is, yes, we were successful in working both on what the information we were distributing, but also in working with smaller groups or groups that are targeted on smaller segments of the city, because they know their constituents. And just want to really reiterate that two things, council member, that chair, sorry, that one is that when we are able to connect with people, that relationship piece that you've heard in other topics today is really important. And so in San Jose, I grew up in Detroit, far less groups that are business support groups, which is the whole strategy about targeting groups and building capacity, because then someone who is knowledgeable about finance in the language that you want to talk to, and the trust that you can have when you're reaching someone who you know is working with and for you, is very much the goal of where we're headed with the EDA work as an example.
Great. Thank you very much. I do need to leave, so I'm going to turn this over to Councilmember Esparza and finish my comments and leave it to Matt Mahan, Councilmember Mahan, to ask his questions. Thank you all.
Thanks, Councilmember Foley. Councilmember Mann, you're up.
Thanks, Chair. By Councilmember Foley. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the great report. I just wanted to ask, I guess my attention was drawn to the end of your slide deck and the objectives, and there are a lot of objectives there, and they all sound great. I'm assuming they are numbered in kind of rank order within each of the categories, but please tell me if that's wrong. And then I was wondering if you've identified key results for those objectives in kind of an OKR-like model.
OKRs all the time now.
Okay. Good.
OKRs all the time. In all seriousness, council member, they are not actually ranked on our slide. They are, we try to we have a number of them that fall into kind of the larger categories. So we try to group them in an effort to kind of consolidate. Those are all of the places that we're working, right? We have different team members working in different areas. For instance, we have on the development side, development facilitation side, we all in the biz dev team, a call can come in and any one of us can take the call, but Emily Lapoma is really our development, kind of large scale development facilitation officer. And so when those kind of calls come in, she is the one primarily doing development facilitation. Right. So we're working all of those areas. And in terms of the actual OKRs, we are through the Community and Economic Recovery Task Force and kind of line on the roadmap, developing those key results that are going to be plugged into the overall community and economic recovery work that OED is doing along with the other departments that are in kind of that line item on the roadmap, or that row on the roadmap. So we have that larger group of OKRs that we're plugging into. And then as we are getting more into our individual work streams, we're developing key results for each one of those work streams. But it was a lot to kind of put out there. And we tried to do that at a high level in the memo, right? So we do have some key results in the matrix in the memo. We have some high level key results that we're working towards.
Yeah, thanks. So I appreciate that. And I read the memo. I guess my feedback is just that I noticed in the deck there's over 30 objectives. And I just personally, my own view would be that prioritization and understanding which ones you are most focused on, which ones are being most resourced, kind of what is the impact of these. That's a lot for any group of people to track. 30 objectives is a lot. And then I think, for me at least, in this kind of report, understanding what the results are, what the key results are, would really help me wrap my head around, well, how are we trying to get there? And then I'd be able to give better feedback if I understood the key results that we're using to organize the how. I mean, the objectives are usually what we want to achieve, but without seeing a little breakdown. And I understand why for 30 objectives, breaking those down into 3 to 5 key results would be pretty overwhelming. I don't think we'd want to look at 150 key results. So I appreciate that. But I just personally seeing maybe a subset of the most important objectives with a little more detail around how, and then I think at least I could give better feedback on which makes sense or where I have questions, and then I think we'd be better able to also assess in the future, come back and say, okay, well, of those key results that we outlined for these objectives, how did we do, in our work around small businesses specifically? Did we hit some of the key results we were hoping to hit? And as it is, it's very high level. And I know you all are doing a lot of work and probably have too much on your plates, but I just, as a way of kind of focusing in and getting us aligned around sort of understanding exactly how you're trying to drive this change, at least I would find that helpful. So anyway, that's my main feedback. But again, I appreciate the report and all the work you all are doing. And share that was my only comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? If not, is there a motion?
Councilmember Esparza, if I could I can't raise my hand right now.
Okay, you're next.
Just a couple of things, and I'll make this really quick. Do you have any idea, Blage or Nancy, when those 2 multilingual individuals will be coming on board? And is one of the individuals the motion and that we had made for an East Side business manager?
So Nancy, do you want me to take that?
Sure, if you start, I might tag in there.
Sure, that sounds good. So we are in the process of taking a look. We're hoping to piggyback on recruitments that the city manager's office has already done. And we're taking a look at resumes right now for potential candidates that might fit the position or positions that we have. And we're hoping that we've got a couple of folks in there. If we don't have that, we'll go out for recruitment, and we want to do that as soon as we possibly can. Because as I mentioned previously, we're limited right now. We have 2 or 3 team members that have capacity for Spanish and Vietnamese, but we need to really get those other 2 in. So we want to do that as quickly as possible here in the next month or so. The second thing is that as we have talked about previously, the approach that we're taking with the East Side manager, since we did not get a position in the most current budget, is similar to the approach that we are taking with the Tully Road and Monterey Corridor positions, in that we are going to go out and contract we're putting out an RFP, and we're going to contract for those services for a 2-year period. And so we're in the process of putting that RFP together that can be both posted with kind of the scope of work. And we will be sharing that, as we've shared with the other council offices. Once that's ready to go, we'll be sharing that with your office as well.
So, okay, so I just want to be clear. So those two positions are separate from the contracted business manager position.
They are.
Right.
They are.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Okay. And those two additional positions that would be city employees, if you could just explain to me the scope of the work that they'd be doing, would this be similar to a business manager for the areas?
No, they're going to be part of our business development team, right? So we have our business development team that does a variety of different things, everything from business outreach to development, taking questions on development facilitation, usually small scale, because as I mentioned, we have a development facilitation officer that kind of works on the larger scale projects. They would be doing, they'd be involved in the webinar series that we have. They'd be connected to commercial brokers when we're trying to pair business owners with potential business spaces. So they're working, citywide. We're also doing a lot of work, as I think all of you know, in facilitating the development and the processes over at the flea market to help the vendors there. And so these people would be pulled into that work as well. So it's general business development work citywide as part of the overall business development team, implementing kind of the goals and objectives that we have on the work plan to build small business resiliency, also to conduct corporate outreach, to increase our business support and technical advisory network, and also to assist our business support organizations citywide in becoming stronger.
Okay. Just from the presentation, I was very pleased to see a couple of things. I mean, all of it was great, and thank you so much for all the work that all of you have been doing with such a small team, and a huge lift, in my opinion, when it comes to supporting our small businesses and making sure that they stay open or they can recover from a really very difficult year. But what stood out to me was a couple of things. One is that we're seeing that technical support and almost hand-holding of the businesses really supported businesses in remaining open or recovering a little bit faster than I guess in general. And also the extended network that they're connected to. And as I see it, whether it's the business manager downtown or the East Side business manager that hopefully will come on board soon, or these two other individuals that you're hoping to bring on with a multilingual capability, at the end of the day, I think we're all speaking the same language and talking about doing the same thing, I hope, which is to support them, build capacity, provide technical support, really almost hand-holding individuals so that they can get through a very difficult time. I will say that I hope that we have an opportunity as these other individuals come on board, and I don't know if it actually sits squarely in your office or if it sits in another office, but to be able to track those folks that are closing, I think it makes it very difficult to support businesses who are on the verge of closing down or who just closed down for a number of reasons without knowing the why or the how, and how we could have prevented it from happening, or how we could have supported them in order to keep them in business. So I'm not sure why we're not tracking, or maybe it's too difficult to track, but even in terms of how many business licenses we had, just a year prior to the pandemic, and then in the heart of the pandemic, and then now, I think just being able to get a snapshot of that
having those licenses and knowing how many we have. And I'm not talking about the new ones that are coming online. I think that was part of that first presentation or the beginning of the presentation. There was a comment that the ones that are coming online are not nearly as many as pre-pandemic times, but to actually know how many we had in our city and how many we have now. I think just being able to do a side-by-side comparison would give us an idea of what's happening in the small business world. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Hi, Councilmember, can I briefly address it? Because it's
Sure, yeah,
also, it's something that I'm frustrated by as well, just to be frank with you. So our business tax registration system as currently established is not set up to sort of accurately give us a picture of who's coming and going and why. It would be amazing if it were, and we could, make some recommendations on how to do that a little bit better. As it stands now, we are doing some work to try to suss out as best we can through the current database, sort of what we can find. There is some information we can glean, and we're currently working on that. But unfortunately, the database doesn't tell us whether a business closure was permanent, whether they just moved, and it sort of has a lot of holes in that. So we continue to look for ways to understand exactly the issue you raise, don't think it's kind of the end of the conversation, but there's sort of some fundamental challenges with the way our business tax registration system is currently set up.
So you can't just do a very rough guesstimate by looking at what we had pre-pandemic and what we have now?
We should be able to go in and just double check the numbers. We won't be able to, it won't give us who specifically left, council member. They don't tell us necessarily who is going out of business. So that's much harder to get down to. I probably sound like a broken record, but one of the things that's great about the business association that we're and the PBID that we're building toward in your district is those folks will have a much clearer knowing of who is needing some help based on having the PBID and the regular touch points with the business association. And it will give us an opportunity to earlier link up with resources that can hopefully help.
Yeah, but that would be dependent on us having a PBID or working towards a PBID. It doesn't give us an idea of what's happening, for example, in Councilmember Esparza's district along Tully Road or Story. And these are districts that we know already that were impacted, and to have just even a vague understanding. I mean, I think we can deduce what's happening with the businesses, but to be able to hear it from them directly, or again, just being able to look at a comparison and say, hey, we lost 5,000 small businesses. We can deduce why. It may not be 100% accurate, but it is our intuitive feel based on our expertise that these are the reasons why. But I just think that it would be helpful. I mean, as I go just simply along Alum Rock Corridor and I see all the closed doors, it would be great for me to have an idea, because I think that starts to shift where we pay attention, where we provide that support, where we provide also the budgetary necessity to invest in those neighborhoods. I can advocate until I'm blue in the face, but unless the entire council is agreeing with me, I'm not going to get those funds.
So we can certainly go back and take a geographic area on Alum Rock from one point to another, and then do that comparison to say pre-pandemic, how many small businesses were there, and then take a snapshot of what we're showing as business licenses. So as a higher level data, we can definitely do that. And that's something we can get back to you quickly about. And it is the challenge of knowing the specifics of who is there and who is not. That's where it gets tougher.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And so, and the other part of the strategy that was presented was a PBID, which, I've been advocating for years. I do hope that we take the lessons learned from the Alum Rock corridor in terms of, what are the challenges? What are the obstacles? How do we get past them? What's the next strategy? If there is, the Vietnamese Business Association wants to pass a PBID, how do we help get them through it much faster than Alum Rock? I don't need to remind everybody, or maybe not everybody is aware of this, but it's taken now up to 5 years to try and get the PBID over the finish line on Alum Rock. And we really need to be honest with ourselves and be forthcoming in terms of what have those obstacles been, so that we can truly help these business corridors before those businesses leave. If we truly believe that this is a strategy to keep these businesses open. So that's it for me, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Peralez?
Yeah, thank you very much, and appreciate the report. I think a lot, obviously, to digest here, and there was a significant amount in the report and your attachments, so I appreciate that. And I think, more importantly, knowing that it's coming from a very small team, and knowing as well that this team has directly responded to outreach from my community members, such as Blogate helping to be a part of the Greater Downtown Economic Recovery Task Force that we held last year, which was in a completely additional responsibility on her part that she did not have to do, but she did and participated. And I know when I have connected small business owners to the resources we have, they've been very pleased. I think the biggest challenge we have is we don't simply have enough bodies, enough people to do the work and support the number of businesses that we have that would need it. So I know you're doing a lot with a little, and I just wanted to say I appreciate that, and that's shown here in the report in regards to all of the efforts that you do have, all the objectives that you're setting out. I just have one main key question, and this is in regards to how we're weaving in equity, and I saw it within the report and the memo discussing efforts of resources in other languages like Spanish and Vietnamese, but I think we have to recognize at this point that it goes much farther beyond just the language access and the staff support, and that it has to be a conscious effort, and certainly doesn't require somebody that speaks another language to be conscious about that. When you look at the data, and you put this all throughout your slides, obviously, and it was in the report, in regards to both federal data and then even local data on like the PPP loans, we still see inequities on the communities that are receiving support or that are indirectly impacted more than others that are still struggling. So we know all of that is true. That's throughout your report. And then when looking at the objectives themselves, I am curious how staff plans to weave, achieving or attempting to achieve, to carve into that gap that we know we see with so many, particularly small minority-owned, women-owned businesses. When you look at some of the objectives, none of the 28 objectives, I believe, describe specifically, a direction towards that gap, that inequity gap. But they all, I think, right, have an opportunity where we can, especially as you look at the programs that we have, placing adults and youth into paid work experience, Resilience Corp, San Jose Works. We know that we may automatically get particular demographics to apply and be a part of that program, but I think that it would be better that we're conscious about it, and I'm hoping staff already is. So that's what I would like to see if you can answer. Just how are you weaving that consciousness into all of these different objectives?
Nathan, let me take a quick shot and then ask you guys to to fill in, and we can always refine our language, but the emphasis in the report is really a reflection of what we have already been doing for the last 18 months in a good way, of really focusing on the areas that are most vulnerable and those that are have the biggest impact from COVID and it continuing. And those areas are carefully tracked in the census tracts that we have mentioned that are primarily people of color and or small business and minority owned. So our metric is on such a big part of what we're doing is wholly focused on the businesses that are in those areas. And just as a quick mention, in the Nathan mentioned the info memo that was given out, the PPP loans, they didn't, from the Fed and state, they didn't track what was coming to people of color, which is a huge problem, because if you don't track it, you don't know. I do want to say that of the dollars that we were able to target, and admittedly it was a smaller amount between business development and work to future, more than 90% of the dollars that went out are focused on minority and people of color. So we are incredibly focused on this because we should be. So we have no hesitance to say that. Nate or Blage, anything you want to add there?
I just wanted to say that, what we are weaving it into all the work that we're doing. So it's equity is not a separate objective, right? It's interwoven into all of this work. That the geographies that we're placing kind of our primary, initial outreach, and like with the biz walks, those are all in those geographies around the city where it's primarily, small and minority owned business commercial corridors. The other thing that's kind of not as evident, but it's one example of how we're weaving equity in, is that there's significantly more money in each one of these budgets now for printed, resource brochures or printed flyers that are printed in multiple languages. And as we learned, one of the lessons that we learned is that you can't rely on just the digital communication. You can't rely on it in one language. So that's like one example where it's not as overt, but it's in our budgets. We learned the lesson. We're doing something that we didn't do previously in a way that's a little bit more, it's not as overt, but we're doing it. And equity runs through all of the work that we're doing. Or we're trying to have that lens through all of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It absolutely sounds as though you're weaving it through the way that I would appreciate. And so thank you for doing that and for your response in that regard. Looking forward to continued progress here. Thanks.
Any other comments, questions? I'll just quickly add mine before we accept a motion and move on. I wanted to thank Blage and Sal for going out to Story Road, door to door. I think that's really important. To me, that's one of the lessons learned, having gone door to door myself to the businesses in my district, is that they need that in-person help. And there's a lot of terminology that really micro business owners don't understand. Even the I know at the county there was a sort of a controversy over the word grant. Like, people don't know what that is. To them, they hear loan, right? So at the county, I think they were using the word scholarship because that was understood like something you don't have to pay back, right? And so it's just, there's a lot of nuance here, and a lot of folks who try to just kind of do it themselves, and they can't, not with COVID. And if they try to do it by themselves, they're going to miss out on opportunities and grants. So I did want to just call out the team for having gone door to door, and I think that was really instructive. With that said, is there a motion to accept the report?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Can Can we have a vote?
Carrasco,
Aye.
Perales,
Yes.
Mahan,
Aye.
Esparza.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think we're on to open comment.
Tessa Woodmansee?
Whoops, I'm trying to see. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Tessa Woodmansee?
Yes, hi. Thank you very much. Well, I guess you can hear me. Yeah, there you go. I guess good. Thanks. And basically, I didn't understand why Maya Esparza was like off camera a lot, not paying attention. It's like, what is she doing? And it was like, and I know everybody's at their home, which is good. But I think also the thing that really bothers me more than any particular thing is that we're not paying attention to our climate crisis. That really bothers me, because that is where, it's not an emergency. And that's what Greta Thunberg, that's her most recent comment, is that we are all deniers because we're not acting like it's an emergency. And that's really true. And my husband is saying that we are going to go extinct, because if you look at it, no matter what you talk about and say, everything's, I see everything looks like it's going back to business as usual. And that is the problem. And we gave all the money to the businesses because I think it needs to be distributed, and let us figure out what we need to do in our own communities. I think that's a big voice that I'm hearing from other neighbors. And I think that's really important. And just because you guys are going forward with a lifestyle that is, fossil fuel, infused, that is going to bring us to extinction, which is where we're going if we don't change. And the science shows that we're not changing. So no matter what you talk about, that it's all changing, it's not. And you guys are going on as business as usual. And we're not preparing for our emergencies. And so that's why I'm saying I want to build a home for homeless and teach them to live without fossil fuels, and to also no waste and no plastic. And growing food is our main focus of our whole curriculum. It's a school, it's an educational program, and you can gather a lot of monies together. And we're learning to be patrons of husbandry, and we share it, make sure that everyone must become a patron of husbandry and take care of the earth, or we're not doing it now.
Thank you, Tessa. Paul Soto, you're next.
Thank you, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe.
That every community, regardless of economic status, should have access to a theater. I am the ballad station. My voice.
Paul, are you there?
Yes.
Dance hall.
I think there's some background music.
Well, I didn't know that. Anyways, I was trying to have a message conveyed by Luis Valdez, and it was public comment, so I figured it was my 2 minutes, so I could. But obviously, it didn't work. What he was saying is he was the voice of the barrio. That there's a corrido in the barrios that can only be understood by the barrio. This is the This is what I'm talking about. I've been talking about it the whole. You have confirmed it within in the context of which you exist. I don't have any compromises. No nonprofit pays me a dime. Do you know that I would go to every single business and do what it is that needs to be done on the east side? I can't. And the reason why, because they beat Spanish out of my mother. You guys did it, man. You just stop. And Perales are sitting on $2.4 billion to all those businesses downtown. This is disgusting. It's just offensive to sit here and not call you out. Perales, the fact that I give you that, you justly centered equity within the context of this, and I will thank you for that. Okay, but you knew this before, so no grandstanding for you. Your role and your job is to protect us in those rooms with hate, in those rooms with opportunity zones, and exploit the poverty that was created for the
Thank you,
benefit of the
Paul.
rich.
Thank you. Mr. Sonsini, you're next. Mr. Sonsini?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
you hear
we
me?
can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I'm glad you can hear me. I want you to hear me. Yeah, this city, man, there's all this money, but take a look around. Unfinished manhole covers on Hillsdale. There's plenty of money for road diets, bike lanes, but you know, the roads are still bad. The way you misappropriate funds is unbelievable. Take a look at downtown. What do you guys do? Start some kind of arts thing to paint over the plywood that's nailed to the windows of the businesses that are not open, which include a movie theater, Safeway. I mean, you can't keep a business going down there. With all the redevelopment money that San Jose has received for the last 30 or 40 years, take a look around. Doesn't look good, does it? And you want to get rid of parking. You want to close off streets. You want to get people out of their cars. How are you going to get there? Who lives down there? Those towers are empty, by the way, people. Everyone thinks that those are full of a bunch of tech workers. They're not. They're empty. They were bought by speculators. That's why all the restaurants go out of business. If you had a lot of people living there, the the grocery store would be open. The restaurants and bars and cafes would be thriving. They are not. And you guys think that if you set up a bike lane and get rid of parking, that's going to do something. You guys are completely misguided. You've been misguided for long before you were there, especially under Susan Hammer, completely misguided. Under Sam Liccardo, beyond misguided. So anyway, it's a tale of a sad city. It really is. I mean, the amount of money wasted. I wish I had a penny for every dollar wasted. I'd be a billionaire. So it's really, you guys should all look around in your Zoom call.
Thank you, Mr. Sonsini. Blair Beekman, you have the last word.
Hi, thank you for the meeting today. As many are feeling proud in California and this country in their ways, we have opened up the economy in this era of COVID-19. This has been based on creative, well-intended good thinking that is meant to address all sides of difficult COVID-19 issues. With good community health practices, I hope we can continue to consider open, creative, good ways how to talk about the future directions of COVID-19, its variants, the vaccine process, and the pluses of the aerosol vaccine process this fall. From this, I'm hoping we can work so SJ city employees can continue to have options with weekly tests for COVID, as 48-hour testing is becoming standard in what can be available before live events. I think the mask mandate has done a lot to help limit the spread of COVID-19. November may be the time to begin to prepare for a winter return of COVID-19. And LA County is planning to start vaccinating its school children this January 2022. I hope San Jose can put off their city government mandate, vaccine mandate until this same time, January 2022. In learning how to better respect community health and safety this fall, I hope we can all learn together how to take the next steps to more openly better describe the realities of taking the vaccine and what can one expect in our day-to-day lifestyles. This can help make things more clear for people if taking the vaccine can be worth it, and for better understandings for people who have taken a vaccine and feel uncomfortable in doing so. We have many new AI data collection concerns. It is a continual care of good open democratic practices with data collection that can offer an openness, a caring, a positiveness, a sustainability, our good heart and our good humanity that can simply help ourselves this fall as we move deeper into our technological future this fall. Good luck with the eviction moratorium issues.
Thank you, Blair. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.